stepped back and was like, what do I actually want to do with my life?
That old question.
Yeah. Oh, well, music's the thing that resonates with me mostly. I want to learn how to speak the language that's been like speaking to me my whole life.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool, let me relocate to my best mate's shed in the back of his garden and do acid and mushrooms every weekend for a year and figure out who the fuck I am and what it is I'm here
cheers
for.
You to that.
Absolutely. And then it was just like, I released my first song, got that over and done with, and then kind of being like, well, I've learned so much on this process and there's still so much I want to learn. Let me start a podcast. Let me start bringing some authenticity back so I can kind of create a lane for myself also as well.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like maybe I wouldn't be received as openly as I would be if I created that space myself. Yeah. So the podcast was kind of just like trying to bring people into a self-reflective space. And yeah, because I felt like that was what my music was going to be about. That's what my artistic output was going to be about. Yeah. So yeah, that was it. And then it's just slowly working my way back into it while also living in London, being with my girlfriend, building a home, like working towards all of my stuff. So taking on those responsibilities. Yeah. And while also juggling like the dream, I guess.
Fuck that dream.
But I'm the host of this podcast, not the subject. So we will talk about you now.
Fabulous.
And I'll give us a little sync clap. And thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming all this way in Birkenstocks on a rainy Monday night.
Anyone who knows me knows that Birkenstocks in the rain or snow is a fully legitimate and regular occurrence for me. So
I'm not going to argue with that. You sound like a seasoned professional.
I am. I just don't like having my toes restricted, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But pruny and wet and wrinkly.
Yeah, pruny, wet and wrinkly. But again, like you know, I'm a diehard driver, which is terrible and very environmental. But you know, you don't prune when you're driving.
Fair enough.
What can I say?
And wet socks and wet shoes are not the one.
Exactly.
As I'm finding out right now.
Do you know a Birkenstock dries very quickly?
Interesting.
It's a very important thing to know.
That's a solid USP.
Literally.
That really is.
I think they should give me an ad. A lot of people have said to me, you should do an ad, because I'm literally like the biggest diehard fan. Come rain, shine, snow, I'm in with my toes out in a pair of Birkies, so...
Absolute savage.
Always the same style as well. I'm a savage for it, so...
Well, thank you for coming on. I'm a huge admirer of your work, of all of your work, and the way that it's progressed as well, from early photos and just like real authentic photo shoots to even you've remained integral even through to your corporate, still artistic expression, even though it's for big brands or it features big faces, or regardless of what you do, there's a real spirit to it, there's a real energy and there's a real authenticity. So I'm grateful for that. And also grateful for you to just come in and have a conversation with me, and hopefully one that is beneficial to both of us.
Always.
And whoever is on the other side of these lenses and these microphones.
Do you know, I say to people whenever I'm asked to do something that involves me talking that I love the sound of my own voice. Yeah. Which I suppose is partly true. But I just love people and I love conversations, and that's why I do what I do anyway. So there's nothing better than being invited for a little chin wag. So
amazing.
Thank you for having me.
It's the best place to start. But I start every podcast with the same question. Mm-hmm. And I'll pose it to you like I posed to everyone who sat in that chair before. What is art?
Oh, God, it's a big question, isn't it? What is art? Art is it's expression. And I think for me, something that is definitely maybe getting lost a bit nowadays, it is integrity. And that is something that I think it's really hard to keep hold of. It's interesting what you just said about kind of when you move to bigger faces or more corporate jobs, or, you know, when you're trying to toe the line of art and commerce, which is something we all have to do. Otherwise, you can't eat and you can't pay your rent. For me, like, the true artists out there are the ones who retain their integrity no matter what the paycheck is at the end of the brief, you know? And I know for sure it's not easy, but for me, that's what I think makes me an artist, even though I hate that word.
You hate the word artist?
in general, no. The word artist is an amazing, like, wonderful
But
word.
when you apply it to yourself,
to me, really terrifying. It becomes a very big word when you apply it to yourself.
what is attached to it?
I think when people think about an artist, they've got, there's kind of connotations of like, like wild studios and painting and aprons and, and actually, I suppose if you come to my house and sort of see how I work when I especially do my kind of personal projects, there is actually an element of like the 2019 version of that. It's not paints that I work with, but I engrave into glass and I'll wear safety goggles. So, I suppose I am falling into those things. But artist is such a big word, If you're an artist, it's like you're saying you're Picasso. And when, art, just like any other career, can you call it a career? Yeah, it's a career.
Yeah, I guess.
Genre?
I don't really...
What would you call it?
Vocation?
Vocation. Nice, yeah. Just like anything else, there's people on all different rungs of that ladder. But for some reason, the word artist, it almost sounds like an arrogant word, to apply it to yourself. And that makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Well, I do feel like there's a little bit of, an assumed pretension about it. But when we think about artists, when we think about art in today's world, we do think about big numbers. Yeah. And we think about notoriety. And we think about capitalism, really, we do. Yeah. Because you think of a Banksy or whatever, you think of... You think of 50 million. You think of Picasso, you think of 100 million, you know what I mean? But away from that, in reality, an art isn't necessarily something that you desire to be, because it comes with so much sacrifice, so much stress, so much uncertainty. So it almost puts a target on your back, and not necessarily from a judgmental point of view, but from like a survival point of view. You expose yourself and you make yourself vulnerable. So I do understand the hesitance in a how will I be received way, how will people judge me way, but I also understand that there is a spiritual weight to the role of an artist. And do you feel like it comes with an added responsibility instead of just the judgment?
Oh, for sure. Like there's that part of it that's like, like you said, what other people will think. But there's also a massive part of it that's like, have I earned that title yet? And that, we talk about art and the struggle, which is something that we should probably return to, because I think that's it's been so drummed into our heads that sometimes we can't think of anything else, and I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, but yeah, it's like, have I earned my stripes yet? Am I allowed to say that? And I think if you are a true creative, well, maybe this isn't true for all creatives, but certainly for me, I feel that by the time I've maybe received some accolades for a project, or by the time something's been published or has come out for the world to see, I'm like 2 projects ahead of myself.
Okay.
I'm already stressed about the next thing. I'm already wondering if I'm being an artist in the next situation. So there's this kind of disconnect between the moment when people are kind of telling you you're brilliant and you being spiritually right there in the middle of a project, Mm-hmm. And that's something that I always find really hard to bring back together again, is kind of like even if you win an award or something, like often it's a project that I've kind of almost put to bed, because I think also as an artist, it's that thing where nothing is ever finished. There's always something else you could do to it. And there comes a point where you have to stop and walk away. And to all intents and purposes, it is finished because you're not going to work on it anymore. But people are complimenting you on something that probably for the rest of your life, you'll be going, if only I had another week, I would have X, Y, and Z, So I don't really know where I've gone with this question. I've taken it somewhere else.
I don't know. We found ourselves in great waters, though, I feel like. I feel for the reasons that we just discussed, and there's also like a personal thing of like, there's the judgmental thing of like, do I really want people to put me under the same scrutiny that they put other great people under?
Yeah.
And do I also want to make myself vulnerable to the tribulations and sacrifice and suffering that comes inherent to the life of an individual, which I guess all artists subscribe to?
Yeah.
The weighing up of that decision of, will I call myself that, takes so long that by the time you're willing to name yourself and come out and go, I am an artist.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of whether you've even made anything, just to get to that point of being able to own the label or own the role and all of its responsibility. It's like, you don't even have to have made anything at that point.
Yeah.
Just to have the belief in yourself to stand up and say, I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
I'm making a decision. I'm taking control over my life. That's like, all right, you're there. Now just make some shit.
Yeah, do you know, see, I think it's really interesting that you say that because, excuse me, I feel like in many ways my whole life, but specifically my kind of artistic journey, I feel a little bit like somebody dropped something at one point of a river and I've been swept away by that. And that's kind of, you know, a lot of my progress and a lot of my career has been like very much organic and unintentional, you know, like things started coming and then other things come because of that. And, you know, someone speaks to someone and your name gets around. And, you know, I feel like almost sometimes I describe it with my therapist. Sometimes I say I feel like the train is gone and I'm there on the platform like, I didn't even know what ticket I'd bought, you know, and I'm like trying to run after the train. Like, I know I'm meant to be on that, but what am I doing? So I think actually I really wish that I could kind of have that self-confidence. I think, you know, I'm thinking specifically of a good friend of mine who's right at the start of her artistic journey, if you want to call it that, but she will very straight out there, she tells you that she's an artist and she's a painter. And I have so much respect for that because I wish that I could say that. And the reason I can't is because when I say it, I want to say, I'm an artist.
You're a what? An auntie? Congratulations.
You know, like, and I don't feel that strength of conviction to say I'm an artist, you know? And I think probably there's a part of that comes with a certain humility that I really want to retain in everything I do. I think, you know, and there's ways and ways of saying things, but to me, like me sort of declaring, hello, I'm an artist, you know, especially when actually you can call me different things. You can call me a photographer, you can call me a director, but even I don't see myself as that. And I never have, you know, the reality is that I never have, even when I was...
Even though you have a degree in fine arts, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a degree in fashion photography, yeah.
Like
I've got a first
like
and
an
all.
actual...
Yeah.
Declared artist.
Yeah, and I've got, do you know, like, this is the bit that really gets me, right? I've got 6 pictures in the permanent collection at the National Portrait Gallery.
Incredible.
I think 5 of which are on show, I think at the moment. I've got to check those dates. But they're up in October in some point and they'll be up until next February. But still, I don't feel that I've kind of earned my stripes to say that. And I don't think that's actually anything to do with the work, which I think brings me back to kind of what you were asking me. That's all to do with me and my feelings about myself. And that's why I say there's an element of me envying people who can, like you said, just come out and say it, even if they haven't made a single fucking thing yet. Because how freeing is that?
Yep.
You know? And I would love to feel that freedom, you know? I think actually there's a lot of things that have sort of held me back from, you know, kind of, I suppose, like mixed media and kind of... I always knew that the photograph was never the end point for me. I think it's partly why I'm analog and partly why I wanted to involve other people and other processes. And then in turn sort of led to directing. But... you know, there is a part of me that does want to have that studio with canvases and an apron and paints all over my face. But it's almost like I don't feel I'm allowed to go and be that person. Why, I don't know. We'd have to spend several hours picking it apart, I think.
Let's go for it. I think Ozone Coffee stays open till late. I don't know how late they stay open, but...
I'm trying to make my episode longer than Merkage Dave, so...
Good fucking luck. I had to trim that down. It was 2 hours, 30 minutes.
Yeah, literally.
But it is interesting. It's like, I'm not necessarily saying that just because you get up in a room full of people, you know, it's the ability to admit it to yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
To not run from it, to not hide from it, to not suppress it.
Yeah.
And it is interesting that you feel that way about yourself, like you haven't earned that. And also the way that you express yourself, your medium is to observe.
Yeah.
Is to observe, let's say, for example, obviously you don't work limited to other artists.
Yeah.
You photograph anyone you find interesting.
Yeah.
And you make films about anyone you find interesting. But you like to observe artists. You like to give them space to just be. And you like to capture that, and you like to immortalize that. You like to stop time on them.
Yeah.
And everyone look at them. And I wonder where am I going?
I don't know, but you sound frighteningly like my therapist. So, have you got a side hustle in psychoanalytics?
No, but you know what? I need to pay.
I'm going to get an invoice at the end of this, aren't I? Yeah.
I've got about 8 lamps running in
Amazing.
here, and I want to get some nice DSLRs to shoot this on instead of these Canon handy cams. So maybe I could take that up. It's just interesting that that's how you subtly express yourself, you know, in these observations of other people who I'm guessing you admire for one reason or another.
Or I think, I'm trying to think how to phrase this without getting myself into muddy waters. You know, admire is one word, but I suppose I don't have to admire everyone that I photograph. But I think what you're saying is, which I've never actually thought of before, but putting my own psychoanalytic hat on here, like in a way that's me photographing myself. You could
Okay, Richard Avedon.
express that.
That was his spiel, wasn't it? Like,
I mean, I'm going to take the comparison and I'm going to run with it. He's actually one of my favorite photographers, so it's interesting that you said that. Especially the In the American West series, which was such a major influence to me when I sort of discovered that.
Whereas his thing was like, you know, that all of my photos are pictures of me.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't think you can get away from that. And I think that's what's interesting about this conversation that we have about kind of diversity. And the thing that I think sometimes gets lost, especially in fashion photography, because maybe that's quite an easy example for me to focus on here. There was, especially when I came up, so I finished university in the early noughties. Was it the early noughties? No, hold on, that would be 20 years ago. I don't know.
Sometime. It's all the past.
About 18. No, hold on. I don't even know how old I am. At some point, I finished university. And there was so much discussion about kind of representation of the models, for example, that we were seeing. You know, everyone was a skinny white woman. And we've done so much to change representations of who is in front of the lens. But still what's missing, and I think I find this more prominent now I've moved into directing, is who is around you on the set. And it's not just the photographer's eyes, which are crucial because my eyes are in my body. My body has been put through a certain set of cultural experiences. The references I draw from, the way I compose an image, what I think is the most important thing to look at, that is all determined by my upbringing, my race, my class, my place in society, how I feel about me and how I feel about others. And so when there's this kind of argument that people have, you know, like, oh, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, if they're black or they're white or they're, you know, well, it does matter. And it matters because you're bringing a whole new set of eyes and a new way of seeing, a way of seeing that comes from a different cultural background, that comes from a different social background, that will find a different part of the same image the most important. And I think in directing, what is so interesting to me is how difficult it still is to have like a representative crew around you. And when you get into that realm, I mean, photography for me is more of like it's not a one-man show, but it's me and one or two assistants, normally people who I like really trust, who make themselves very invisible so that I can get the sort of intimate space that I need with my sitter. But directing, you can't help but have a massive crew around you.
Yeah.
And so if you think about the kind of talent that you're shooting, you have to wonder if you're creating an inclusive space for them to come and sync their lyrics or, you know, be semi-naked or whatever it is you're asking someone to do. And I think while...
Just to be themselves, essentially, as comfortably as possible.
Exactly. And I think whilst production companies and whilst producers and whilst the industry as a whole is still so predominantly straight, white and male, and I'm not saying that they aren't making moves to change that, because they are, and there's lots of examples of that, but more so than just the directors, everyone else on that set is important to kind of what space you're creating. And I think that's been a bit of a frustration for me in the last year and a half, is that it seems like really hard work for a lot of people just to make sure that, you know, we've got a representative space around us, you know? Like, I always say, I want to see what I see at the bus stop in the morning on set.
Yeah.
And when I look at the bus stop in the morning, it's not all blokes, white blokes, you know, like it's a myriad of different people. And for that reason, I will push and pioneer, you know, pioneer, it's a bit of a big word. I will push, you know, to have ideas that are based around not necessarily the idea itself, what's in front of the lens, but let's see what happens if we have an all-female crew. Everyone, from the cab driver to the runner to the, you know, DOP to the producer. No one with a penis is allowed on set. What happens, you know? And I'm not doing that to say men have no worth.
Well, have you done that?
They do. I've been trying to do that. And I probably shouldn't have said it, because actually someone else will steal that idea now. I tell you what's difficult.
My girlfriend's making a film at the moment about Audrey Hepburn.
Okay.
And her whole crew is all women.
Amazing.
So she's doing it, and they've been traveling all around the fucking world doing it. And I haven't actually spoken to her about the difference, I guess, that she feels that what has those conditions does she feel what will that create that she wouldn't have got with maybe a more mixed crew. But in your experience, what do you find it enables to happen?
I think the most important thing is to kind of pick apart the innate power struggle. Struggle's not the right word. The innate power hierarchy between a man and a woman. There's no more to that sentence, you know, like full stop. Because although in most of my career, I've been, you know, I'm quite a ballsy person. Even the fact that I say ballsy is interesting, you know, because men have balls, women don't, you know. So that's me saying I'm a masculine person, which is not true. You know, and I like to think that I'm quite a feminine person, but, you know, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. But it was actually when I started directing more so, and I guess because I'm then in charge of a bigger team, that I realised, and actually I should say my first ever like foray into directing, quite by accident, a lot of the team were female. So again, I started, you know, that's what I thought all sets would be like. Until I went to Atlanta and shot a music video out there, and I had a first AD who's meant to be my right-hand man. Got along with him like a house on fire. It was amazing. So I was actually feeling really confident about everything, because I knew that over there, certainly, I know that we had a female project manager and a female producer, neither of whom had worked with a female director before ever in their lives. So I almost felt a certain responsibility in that.
Yeah.
But that told me what kind of crew I was going to be working with. None of them had worked with a female director either. So my first AD, who was an absolute pleasure, it got to about 5 a.m. We did 2 night shoots. So it's 5 a.m. on the morning of the first night shoot. And I thought I was maybe imagining it, but suddenly anything I said sort of went over his head. And if my male director of photography said something, things seemed to be happening.
Okay.
But I'm like, okay, I don't want to be that person who's like, you know, somebody's being sexist, you know, because even that feels still difficult to do, especially when, who am I going to tell? The men on the set, right? Like, difficult situation. You know, my producer and my EP were both men from my side. So I'm like, Anyway, it got to the point where he turned around and said something to me like, oh, we better do what Olivia says, lest she gets her panties in a fucking twist. And I was like, no.
Not having it.
Like, this is where I can't deal with this. And my reaction was to cry. And I'm not ashamed of that. But God forbid a crew of 95% men was going to watch me cry on set. I would have lost all authority that I'd sort of built up, you know. And ultimately, I'm trying to be the boss of all of these guys, you know. So I had to walk away to do that, which in itself really pissed me off, actually, because I shouldn't have to be ashamed of crying. It doesn't make me any less strong, you know. That's just my version of a male director who might throw a cup of coffee in someone's face.
Okay.
And it's much safer, I must say, to leak from the face
just go
than to
around
attack somebody, you know, or kick and scream and, you know. So I walked away and spoke to my male EP and producer, and I said, look, I'm not having this, like, this is what's going on. And, you know, they were both really supportive. You know, do you want us to talk to him? Do you want us to kick him off set? Do you want us to? And I'm like, well, what good is that going to do me? We kick him off set, I lose a shoot day, you go and speak to him, the girls got the boy to come, and, you know, like, none of it seemed right. So I'm like, what I want to do is I want to carry on now. Like, you guys need to hype me back in. Let's carry on, and I'll speak to him when we're finished. So I grabbed him at the end of the shoot day, and I told him to come over, and he went, ooh. And I said, nah. I was like, even the fact that you've done that. And I said to him, look, it's 2019. It was 2018. I said, it's 2018.
It was going to be 2019.
It's going to be 2019 next year. Yeah, I said, it's 2018. And it's embarrassing how you've treated me tonight. And, you know, the thing that was so interesting was, I mean, I obviously went on more of a rant and I explained to him exactly what happened. He said to me, oh, it's just locker room chat. I said, I don't care if you think it's locker room chat or not. Look with your eyes around you right now. And he did. I said, show me where the women are. No women were left there. Everyone had gone home, you know, like, all that's left is crew, men everywhere. I'm like, this is who I'm trying to keep my authority in front of. And you undermined me. And he, to his, what's the word? In his defense, the next day I got a message before we got on set saying, hi, Olivia, I'm going to bring better energy today. Just wanted you to know that. And he did. And, you know, I think sometimes it's as simple as people just haven't. And why would you? If you're used to being a man on set with men, there's nothing new there.
If
and
your
that
ignorance
day for
is
you,
never challenged.
Exactly. And, you know, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but, you know, it was a moment where I really felt like, what am I going to do about this? There was nothing that was appropriate. Me crying was inappropriate. Me having my male producer say something felt inappropriate. Me saying something myself felt really difficult because I felt like I was having to... It was difficult for me to stand up for myself in that way because I, you know, like maybe a man may have been.
Yeah.
I wasn't brought up to think that I can command a room like that, you know? And so I think that's like a micro incident in a big world of macro incidents like that, you know, even down to the pitching process. I think, you know, when you get to a higher level with directing and you're going for big brands and big commercials, you know, like inherently, even some of the women who are working at those companies will trust a man more. And maybe that's
or it comes down to the fact that it's harder to find women with the same amount of experience that a man has, which means that a woman taking charge of a project is a greater risk, even though they're probably just as capable to do it.
Exactly.
They just haven't had the opportunities and the chance taken on them.
And that's what, you know, I had a very interesting conversation with a guy who works in advertising who I pretty much told this same story to. And he said to me, well, firstly, he said two things. One, he said... I hear what you say about crying, but I can see why a client would be uncomfortable if there was somebody crying on set. And I said, well, that's not my issue to change. That is their issue to change. There is no difference between someone kicking, screaming and shouting and someone crying. It is two different expressions of exactly the same emotion, you know? So I'm not going to take the responsibility for them thinking that's a weakness, because it's not, as far as I'm concerned. And if I inhibit that behavior, I'm propagating this same thing. We've got to get over it, you know? It's this whole, you know, oh, you're acting like a girl. Like, yeah, great. And, you know, doesn't mean that I'm not capable, doesn't mean that I'm not in control, doesn't mean that I'm not, or maybe it does mean I'm not in control, but so does the kicking and screaming. That means that man is not in control at that moment, you know? So I found that really frustrating.
With these inclusive environments and making sure that the crew looks like what your friendship circles look like, or you know, making sure that it's as the spectrum is as celebrated as possible.
Yeah.
How does that then benefit the work? What does that do for what comes out of the process?
Well, because it gives you a wider pool of understanding for a start. It also gives you a wider pool of like input. You know, I don't like to work as an island, you know. I'm there to listen to people's suggestions. And if there's someone on set and, you know, I need to think, what does this person do next? You know, I'm stuck. What does this person do next? You know, then if I ask my team around me, there's going to be 5 different people with 5 different perspectives on what that person should do next. And that is all about how you're brought up, who you hang around with, you know, like what your life has been so far as to how you're going to answer that specific question. And if I have 5 people with 5 different backgrounds, I've got 5 interesting next steps to choose from. If everyone comes from the same place, you get a more homogenous answer to something. And that's the same in like working methods, you know. I think the other thing is there's an entitlement that comes with being, I want to say straight, white and male, but I don't necessarily use that as like a term that defines someone's gender, sexuality, or, race.
Yeah.
Because actually I think that all different people can be straight, white and male. It's kind of like a word for a societal upbringing that gives you entitlement, tells you that a certain way of being is professional, a certain dress code is smart, a certain, you know, and that has filtered down from straight white maleness. They rule the world. We know this. And if you can surround yourself with people other than that, you will always get the side of the coin from a person who has had to fight against that their whole lives. No matter what your difference is to that kind of homogenous top line, you get the hustlers, you get the kind of hardest working people. I think you get better problem solvers. You get, because by their very life, they've had to do more of that, you know? And for me, that creates an environment of people who I like to think in terms of their working mentality, like I do. You know, we can hustle and problem solve our way out of anything. Even if all the lights break and there's no camera left, how can we make this work? Someone in that room will have an idea.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I think it, you know, kind of brings to the table.
It's interesting that we've ended up here almost as an entry point away from the esoteric stuff. Once we've kind of detached from ourselves, this is where we've ended up straight away. And it's almost like a reflex.
Yeah.
It feels. Is this something that you feel like you have to be defensive of as a white woman?
Yeah.
In a black dominated space? Is it something you feel like you have to defend? Because, you know, like you said, it could be a black woman doing your job, and it feels like maybe you feel like it should be.
Yeah, and in lots of instances it should be. And I think, so the first thing I would say is the word defend is, I would chop and change that word out dependent on who I was talking to.
Okay. Because
I don't need to defend that point to anyone who has lived that point, if that makes sense. But so I would like to think that I'm less defensive and more proactive.
Okay.
Because the one thing that I am absolutely certain I don't want to do is sit back and let things happen around me. You know, I'm here because I want, and actually my kind of reason for being, I'm learning as I grow older, and the more I sort of delve into the kinds of projects and the kinds of cultures and places and people that I photograph and direct, I'm realizing that I am like an equality warrior, if there is such a thing. And I am very frustrated by how the world is completely imbalanced. And if I can be a small part of a conversation, I'm going to caveat this, because the thing is, it's like, I don't want to preach to the converted. There are lots of people who have lived this, who don't need to hear what I'm saying right now. There are also a lot of people, and a lot of those people tend to have like kind of high up positions in ad agencies. You know, it's a lot of people who don't or haven't understood what I'm saying now. Just like that first AD on that shoot, you know, might not have ever thought about the fact that it was all men and I was the woman in charge, you know. I think there's a lot of people that haven't yet had somebody in an impassioned way to the point where they won't take your project unless you sort out how you're running it, explain to them or pull them up on their own behavior and their own ability to make a difference in this world. And I think that, you know, in many ways it kind of gets me into trouble, you know. Maybe trouble's not the right word, but I've definitely been pulled up on talks I've done. You know, I've been pulled up on the fact that I work mainly in, you know, within Black culture, that's been like such a major focus of my work. You know, I've been pulled up on that many times, and I'm always here to listen to that. I'm never going to brush away a person who makes that kind of critique against me. The unfortunate reality of my art, I suppose, is that the focus or my way of expressing what I'm focusing on to date has been very much to try and show the other side. And actually what I think maybe is missing, which I've not focused on because the representation was so imbalanced when I was coming up as a photographer, is the sort of straight white male side of things. Which actually now that what's in front of the lens does seem to be becoming more balanced.
Yeah.
That's where I think I need to kind of focus my attentions.
When you say more balanced, I'm guessing you mean in a corporate mainstream way, right? Because obviously these subcultures and these pockets have always existed of where these people have been celebrated and people have been working. But I guess it's more just about them getting their dividends in return. Not just existing for existence sake and documenting for documentation's sake, but being able to make a living out of the craft, out of their work.
But also, you know, like you said, it's that kind of, it's the unintentional absorption. This is a great sentence. The unintentional absorption of the imagery and the video that is around you.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there is more of a balance and representation within advertising, within, you know, X, Y, and Z. But what is very dangerous about that, you know, when we're watching our adverts now and we see, you know, a beautiful mixed family having their Kellogg's, you know, that's good. But what is dangerous is that is not it.
It's not solved.
Because
it's not fixed.
Who made that advert?
Yeah, okay.
You know, and who went home with 250 grand for making that advert? And that's where, and this is the bit that I don't really even like talking about because it almost undermines everything I'm trying to do. But there are scenarios in which I am offered work where it is not right for me and that job must be passed on to someone else. There's no point to have examples of it. You know, that's not the kind of, I'm not saying it because I want somebody to praise me for doing that. Yeah. I'm saying it because I do genuinely believe that that is how the world should be. And it's difficult for even me to, you know, to make that call on what job is okay for me to be a part of, what job is not okay for me to be a part of.
So you would look at a job and be like, if it doesn't have certain inclusive elements, I will pass it on. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is, a really good example is I was asked once to shoot a photography project on the black female experience.
Okay.
And I read the brief and I was like, I literally replied with a list of photographers that would be would be better at that than I would be, But nowadays there's, and I think the important thing to say is that I'm only human. I fuck up all the time. I make all of the mistakes, we all do while we're on our life journey of unlearning and progressing. And it's very difficult sometimes to turn away that job because you've got to pay your rent as well. But then I've got to weigh up, it's like the greatest good for the world. And this is where I start hearing myself be very earnest. And it kind of pisses me off because I want to be more like sassy and pithy, But I think the reality is that I am genuinely, authentically on a journey to somehow try and address the rebalance of not just what's in front of the lens. I kind of was there as that was changing, coming up. Now I recognize from the people around me who are frustrated, the creatives around me who are frustrated, the opportunities that come to me and not to them. Mm-hmm. And I can't understand why, although I know very well why.
You can't understand why it comes to you and not them, not why they're frustrated.
Oh, no, of course. Exactly,
good.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make that
clear
for the listeners. For everybody.
There's a part of my white privilege that now I must use to bridge a gap.
Okay.
And that's a gap that needs to be bridged with other white privileged people.
Yeah.
Who are not trying to be unequal. They're not trying to be closed-minded. They just, as all humans do, kind of pick from a pool of things they know. If I said to you now, babe, recommend me someone for a media job, you'd pull out of your arse whatever name of the person you know that would be good for the media job. So again, this comes back to the different people on set and the kind of ways of seeing. If I asked a different person, who would you recommend for this media job? They might pull someone completely different dependent on their sort of circle.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, these industries are so insular and have been for so long that I think people don't realize that they are biased by their white privilege, because of the people that you surround yourself with. And so, the people that you have to recommend that you've worked with before, that you've, it is by its very nature, perhaps more time consuming to, like you just said, find a woman who is right for the job because she doesn't have as much on her reel, because she hasn't been given the opportunity, because she's a risk. It's chicken and egg,
Yeah.
Having known how liberal I am, how open-minded I've always thought I was, and how many times my eyes have had to be pinned open, how many times I've had to be smacked in the face with someone else's frustrations of something. And I say that not in a way that, it's a negative thing for me to receive that. It's like you have to listen. You have to open your eyes and you have to listen. You have to stop being that person of which, I know people in my family who are like this, who says things like, oh, racism doesn't exist anymore because I never see it.
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't.
That's nice, yeah. And that is where the white privilege comes in. If you have all white friends and you think that that's, that you've all got a completely open-minded way of seeing, then you're wrong, You've got to interact with all sorts of people, all sorts of colours, genders, sexualities, to have a broad understanding of the world, or you have to be delving into that literature, or you have to be, it's not necessarily just about the people you hang around. It's about what you let into your
for sure
intelligence,
as a woman.
Yeah.
Like I'm guessing when you started, it was even more male dominated. How did you get to the position where you are? Was it by men being like, oh, I don't think I'm right for this job? let's give Olivia a call? Or was it you like kind of kicking down the door and being like, I'm going to do this anyway, regardless of whether I've got permission?
Do you know, I think the truth is that I never thought about it. These were things that I never thought about. And I think that's probably like, you know, that is just a privileged position to be in. You know, I never felt like I wasn't allowed in those spaces. I was brought up, I went to a very expensive private school.
Okay.
You know, I came out of there, and the thing that I realized that I had that in later life, as I went on and started to meet lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, the thing that I realized that I had that not everyone had, which I was sure that they did, was that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. You know, like I've got a driving license, so I can drive a taxi if I need to. You know, like there is no scenario in which I don't feel like I can land on my feet. And that is a very certain type of self-confidence that not everyone is given in their upbringing.
It's not so insular and self-confident in a sense of like, I'm good, I've got my own back, I'll come out roses every single time.
Yeah.
It's also like, I guess, a material thing.
Yeah.
Like, I've got a driver's license.
Yeah.
I don't know what your family situation was like, but someone might be able to be like, I've got parents who will bail me out.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and then we get into a whole class conversation.
Yeah.
Which I guess all of this really boils down to.
Yeah. Well, it's inextricably linked, you know, class, gender, race, society, creativity, you know, and I think then there's a very big discussion, especially now, to be had on how we appropriate those things, you know, and how at the moment Black culture is so in fashion that there's this really fine line between... I always have in one side of my head is a friend of mine who says, yeah, but we all need to eat, so this is good. So, you know, we're eating, it's good. And on the other side, I've got people who would say to me, you know, I would rather not make the money that I'm making because look at who's taking the lion's share. And it is still, you know, sort of white corporations. And, you know, whoever can spend the most gets the most back. So, you know, and that is why I return again to not just like what is represented, you know, it's not just about making Top Boy, really good example, because I know that their crew was like so wonderfully diverse. And so therefore the people literally being paid at the end of the day was a nice, big, beautiful set of diverse people, you know, that is good. It's when, you know, someone else might put out, I can't think of an example and I probably wouldn't name and shame, but, you know, there's other massive production companies who will be putting out something along those lines that they know is going to sell, that they know is going to appeal to the sort of mass audience that it appeals to now, but have absolutely no feelings of responsibility as to who is taking home the money at the end of the day. And that is a problem. And that is something that we can't solve unless people like me take a little jump off my pedestal every now and again, you know? And that's the bit that is, you know, is not always easy to talk about or explain, that I don't even want to sit and be proud of. I don't want to feel proud of that. I just want to feel like I wish that there were lots of us doing this. And, you know, and essentially what you're asking people to do is to potentially earn less so somebody else can equalize.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, with some type of like Marxist idea.
Yeah, which is fucking hard because again, we can't forget that we're all humans.
Yeah.
And we've all got our own personal struggles completely aside from gender, race, sexuality. You know, there's something going on in your life and there's something going on in my life. And you might need some money right now and I might need some money right now. And it's, you know, it's trying to find that balance in life where it's kind of like what they say about the environment and recycling. You know, we don't need 1% of people to do it perfectly. We need 100% of people to recycle badly, you know, because that's what makes the difference. And that's how I feel about, you know, the equality within the arts is we don't just need 10% of people to be doing this perfectly. We need everyone to be making aware of the responsibility we have to others, full stop.
But at the end, it always coming back to money.
Yeah.
And actually the art itself, the thing that maybe I feel like should be the focus of it, but I don't know, who am I to say, is the celebration of diversity and a spectrum of perspective and experience. But really what it all boils down to is money, is survival and power. So it splits me a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like don't do it, because obviously I am a humanist. I believe that experience should be triumphed, and we should have as many points of reference to cross-reference as possible, because it will make all of our experiences richer, and we'll be so much closer to truth with so much more understanding. But when it like a representation, let's say in advertising, it's to make people feel better about parting with their money to a bigger brand. You know, like, why should I give you my money? I don't see myself in your commercials. I don't see myself in your brand campaigns. So it's like when it comes to advertising, it's almost a manipulation tactic to make people feel like, oh no, come and give us your cash. It's not about humanity. It's about exchanging numbers. So that kind of splits me a little bit. It's
I hear
like,
that.
just have a picture of a t-shirt. Do you know what I mean? Just advertise the product. Why attach it to a lifestyle? Why make it about anything other than what's being sold?
But that's the inherent and major critique of advertising and essentially the world of commerce in itself, you know, and I completely agree with you on that. You know, and it's what is difficult is nowadays trying to genuinely separate yourself from, or like I said right at the very beginning, it's towing the line of art and commerce, you know, because I mean, if it's difficult to get into the kind of big commercial world of advertising, and there is a pocket in there that does do good things for humanity because they have a massive platform. That's the other side of it. That's the side of it that I wish I was involved in, that I'm trying to edge towards, because the platform is so huge that you can viscerally make a difference. Very difficult to convince the client, but that's another conversation. And then the other side of it is the art world, which is just as impenetrable, just as, if not more so. It's what's that word for when everyone is somebody's daughter or cousin, or you know,
Insular.
When but there's a specific word
incestuous.
for it. No, that's when people are all fucking each other.
Well, I mean, but if everyone's someone's cousin or daughter.
Yeah, okay, fine. Incestuous, you know, it's quite a good word for it. You know, the art world is a rich man's world. You know, the galleries, the ones that make loads of money, they're all in West London. You know, they're all frequented by the Tamara Beckwiths of the world, you know, and that is actually arguably even more impenetrable
Guerrilla Girls
than the advertising world.
If you walk into I don't know if it's the exhibition now, but I think it's one of the free ones in the Tate. The first thing you see now is the Guerrilla Girls. Like 95% of the work in this gallery is by men, blah 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 blah, breaks down all of the demographics and speaks to your point on it being so impenetrable. But again, it's like it's come back to money. It's like the people in these galleries, the people that are afforded a luxurious lifestyle, or even at times just a comfortable lifestyle from their expression. And it is this.
But you see, that comes back to, and I think I said way earlier, we were talking about, I said something about art and the struggle and how, okay, so it's almost like, and the thing that maybe pisses me off the most about how people I know really well view what I do, you know, so exciting, you must love your life, you get to be at home all the time, you don't have to go to the office, you know, like,
and then when you do have to go somewhere, you know, you're with all these people,
exactly,
and it must be so exciting.
Like, oh my God, you fly all over the world, all of these things, right? And do you know what? None of those are necessarily incorrect. But the bit that no one sees is the bit where I'm not getting any work and I don't think I'm ever going to work again, or the bit where my mental health is so bad because of the insecurities that this world has placed upon me by my inability to get a job when, pardon me, I thought I was good at what I did, and now suddenly someone else is taking all of the jobs that I wanted, you know, the bit where I'm screaming into my pillow at night, you know, and the bit where this is all on me. There is no boss of the company. I am the boss of the company. And if I can't get a job tomorrow, especially with the subjects that I work with, if I don't say the right thing, if I do a podcast like this and I terribly offend the wrong person, my reputation might be slayed. I might not work with any of those people again. Everything I've built might be taken away from me. Like, this is what is going through my head constantly. The stress of not having a routine, you know, waking up and not knowing next week if I can say yes to your podcast or if I might win this job.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of that is hard. And the thing that I come back to is, you know, a good friend of mine always says, you know, well, you're an artist, so you have to, you know, you've got to have the struggle to be an artist. And then I get my therapist's words in my ears, you know, and she says to me, you're afraid that if you, and for want of a better phrase, I'm going to say fix yourself, you know, that you won't be creative anymore.
Well, what does that mean? How do the two relate? There's a difference between like, oh, you need the struggle, and if you don't fix yourself, but...
Well, I mean,
where do you come into this equation? Because we have kind of tiptoed around you up until now.
Yeah. Where do I come into this equation? Well, you know, it's like if I don't, you know, a lot of my kind of issues that I have been dealing with, you know, like not wanting to, I don't know, go out and take a load of drugs, wanting to, you know, like straighten my life out and be more of a human being who has boundaries and won't be available for somebody at 9 p.m. on a Sunday night because I'm desperate for the work, you know. That is in direct conflict with almost how people feel that you should be, or like it's like this feeling that because I do what I love to do, I should therefore be constantly available to do it. I should, you know, it is very hard to separate, for me to separate the work from the me.
Yeah.
You know, like that's almost impossible. It's definitely not the same as other people I know who go to work as a means to an end, to get a paycheck, to live for the weekend, to, you know, any hour but 9 to 5 is a good hour. You know, me, I don't know when the weekend is because it's all one fucking thing, you know? And I often feel like people don't have any sympathy for me wanting to not pick up the phone at 11 because I'm an artist and that's what I should do.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy. And I think there's also this misconception that I think filters into even me, that you can't have stable mental health. You can't feel stable if you want to be an artist. And so in that sense, my therapist is right in many ways, you know, because how can I be an artist and also have a really normal life?
I think that maybe you find yourself in the middle of the two. Like, you are trying to find that balance between the art and commerce. And if you were fully commerce, then you would be in a production company or whatever, and you would be being assigned projects.
Yeah.
And you would be 9 to 5 office hours, and it would be working for you. And then if you were all the way on the side of artists, if you were really delving into yourself, then you would also be not so accessible.
Yeah.
Just like I'm sure Kano isn't.
Yeah.
You can't call him on Sunday on a 9 o'clock because his boundaries are well established.
Yeah.
So like you find yourself in the middle of these things. Like maybe it comes back to that fear of being like, of boundary setting, I guess. Like, I am an artist. You can't call me at this time.
Yeah.
And I think it's you are an artist. Like, you can tell that in your work. And if you weren't, you wouldn't be as good as you are, and people wouldn't love you as much as they do.
Oh,
and people who
I hated everything you just said, but I'll deal with it.
But also someone who is so amazing, like Kano, wouldn't love you as much as he does, and wouldn't trust you as much as he does.
Yeah.
But then it's this commerce part that's muddying the waters and is pulling you into that space of where someone might expect you to do a Sunday 9 o'clock. Oh, can
Yeah.
you put a little treatment together? And if it's not in by the morning, you're going to lose it, and
Yeah.
you might not have work for a month. So it's like juggling the two worlds, like you said. The more we talk about it, I don't think there is a line between art and commerce. Like, I think commerce just poisons it every single time.
Yeah.
It's a conversation I had with a friend of mine actually a while ago about how it's so difficult for the artists to just be in that space, to be open all of the time because of the internet and because of accessibility, but also because of the business element. Once you start introducing money, you start introducing conversations between teams and between parties. And this might be a curse or a blessing. Like, maybe, you know, the 27 Club or whatever madness, insanity that is associated with full commitment to the art. Maybe it's a blessing in a sense that the commerce takes you out of that space and doesn't make you want to put a gun to your head or whatever, or put your head in an oven, or any of the other things. But
or
also
put a gun to your head in an oven.
right, with the gas on and just blow the whole house apart.
Blow up Bethnal
maybe
Green.
that is a blessing. Maybe that's saving people, but also at the same time, maybe it's diminishing our returns. And in what we're getting now, it's like we're so focused on how it affects dividends and profits and how much people make and all of that other stuff, instead of like championing what I personally feel it's all about, is the human, the individual, the self. And I don't really know.
But how is that human individual self meant to pay their rent? You know, and this is where it comes back to, you know, I think there are lots of people nowadays who can be an artist, but they've got to live off daddy's bankroll or something.
Yeah, well, they don't have to live in London.
Yeah, but even if you
but
don't
then
live in London,
you do have to live in London for meetings or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and there's, you know, there is an argument either way to say that, you know, if you're here, you're within it, and you know, but it doesn't matter if you live in London, Margate, or buttfuck nowhere. You've got to pay your rent. You've got to buy your paints. You've got to re-up your canvases. You've got to, you know, and where's that money coming from? And I hate being this person who's saying this, because actually, like, money is not my driving force. But even the fact that I can say that money is not my driving force denotes a certain kind of privilege on my part. There are lots of people for whom money has to be their driving force because they've got mouths to feed. They've got, you know, a flat to keep going. They've got bills to pay.
Yeah. And and the industry of art is a completely different topic, I think. Like, if you're a gaffer and you're a woman and you've got a kid, that's a whole completely different conversation as to if you're a photographer who's just operating by themselves. Right? I mean, obviously it is a very nuanced conversation, and I think if we'll try to keep it more to the individual, the artists themselves. But
even, you know, like, how can you know, like, because that's like my ultimate dream. And I think about it all the time, how I wish I had headspace from the commerce side of things, from the side of my job that has to keep buying film to put in my camera.
Yeah.
I wish I could take a break from that, because it is poison. And that is what creates so many of the insecurities that I have within my work, which is arguably in my life one of the most stable, I don't even know how to phrase this, like it's one of the things that I always know is there, if that makes sense. You know, there's lots of other things in my life that I don't know if I'm going to wake up and feel okay about them, you know, but work is pretty much always there. And if everything else falls to shit, I know that I can work, you know, I know I can go back to creating images or drawing something, or, you know, finding some peace and some like kind of solace in that. And I wish that I could have the space, the time, the kind of inability to need to pay my bills in order to be that person. Then maybe I would feel like that artist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in exactly the same position.
Yeah.
But I I'm not going to make any money off of my music for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Unless I get extremely lucky, which I'm okay with.
Yeah.
And I think really relieves me of a burden that I can go out, make a commercial or do some film work
Yeah.
to pay for this studio,
Yeah.
to pay for some time just
Yeah.
for me to, like you said, have headspace and be able to reflect on myself, my journey, and make something and my work. You don't have to monetize your craft to live. Like, you could just work 3 or 4 days a week in a pretty decent job, and then, you know, you have whatever time you have left to do your work.
I did do that. I did. But, you know, like for 10 years, I was a picture editor at various newspapers and magazines. So it was nothing to do with my photography. It was being in a corporate environment and being in an office. And you know what? I could not create.
Yeah.
Because 4-5 days out of every 7, I was in a different headspace. And the moment when I became the most creative, the moment when I felt the closest to artist, was when I gave that job up, not knowing if I could even support myself. And that's when I started shooting the book. Yeah. Which, you know, because when I first started shooting the book, I was working 24 hours a day. It was like I was going to kill myself, you know, like through sheer exhaustion. It was not a good time, you know, like I'm working the night shift at the Mirror, digital, waking up, doing a photo shoot, driving to Milton Keynes to shoot someone else and coming back for the night shift, waking up the next morning and processing the pictures, editing them whilst I'm you know, like there was no sleep going on. Yeah. And that was the first time in many years that I'd really been able to have both things coinciding at once. And I say this to a lot of my friends who I know are creatives, who I know are kind of stuck at the moment in the rat race of pure corporate money jobs, that it is so hard to do the both at once. You've just got to sack off the one and go to the other. But if you do that, and that's what made me feel like I was really following my dreams, and if there's one thing I'm proud of, it's that I can support myself now with my art. That's what makes me the most proud, you know, like not having to have that other job, not having to have that 5-day a week distraction that exhausted me so much that I couldn't ever create, is a blessing. But in order for me to keep it that way, I have to earn. And that, you know, that is at the expense of monetizing parts of my craft, you know. And I think it's interesting you say that, because there are parts of it that will always be too precious to monetize.
Like what?
Like my glass prints that I make, you know, like they are not made for sale. They are made because they are extraordinarily beautiful, and because nothing makes me feel more connected with the freedom of the spirit of artistry as when I've got a pane of glass with a black and white picture printed onto it, and I'm terrified to make a mark on it with an engraver because what if I fuck it up, you know? Like that is what really thrills me and gives me life. And it's interesting even having this conversation, because I know that I have been, it's almost now that I'm talking about, you know, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago maybe 4 years ago that I actually gave up the day job. Yeah. And it's interesting now we're talking, because I see how I've turned my art a little bit into the day job again now. Yeah. And I see now both ways that actually inhibits artistry. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is just the monetization of that. No matter what way you're doing it, that sort of focus on needing to pay the rent, needing to, you know, those things that we all have to do, how that affects my ability to be free. And it really does, you know, and that's something that I'm, you know, I literally said it this morning in therapy. I said, there's so many things I want to do. I want to paint. I want to read books. And it's stuff that it's like embarrassing that I would say that. So easy to paint or read a book. I'm not saying I want to climb Kilimanjaro. That takes planning, you know.
Yeah.
To read a book, it's this hard, you know. That was all I had to do.
Time is the only obstruction.
Well, it's not even time, it's psychology, you know? Like, there's a psychology behind my inability to do that. It's like...
Well, you're talking about openness then.
What do you mean?
Well, the psychology behind reading a book is to absorb information.
Yeah.
To absorb information, you have to open yourself up.
Yeah.
So it's not time, and it's not the mentality. It's not being able to open yourself up to receive.
That's interesting.
So you're back in the same cycle again of you're just doing something for money.
Yeah.
And that's taking up so much of your mental space that you're the switch over. It's not necessarily like, if you could switch like that, which I guess is some kind of mastery in itself.
Yeah.
It's just the switching over of your mindset and your perspective from like not being so cerebral and working to kind of sitting back more and just being open to receive whatever kind of inspiration or whatever kind of energy that you need to grow, I guess, because that's what you want to do when you're reading, right? You want to learn, you want to grow, you want to expand. And I'm guessing that's painting, working, reading, all of this stuff is just physical manifestations of your desire to grow. And that's not happening because of your preoccupation with survival.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you, but then that makes me feel sharp about, you know, how can you not be preoccupied? I mean, I'm pissing myself off because if I was sat on the other side of the table, if I was I just imagined that you were me, and that felt really weird. I was looking at myself for a second. The power of the mind, eh? You know, if I was sat on the other side of the table, my line to everyone, and I really fucking mean this, is you cannot think about the money, because the second you think about the money, it's not authentic anymore. And that is the truth with anything that I make that I consider to be, you know, a great project or art. Or it's interesting, one of my assistants said to me today, you should make a book. And I thought to myself, what would I put in it?
And I've already done that.
Well,
do they mean a book about you?
No, he said you should make another book. You know,
he
wasn't being ignorant, but you know, no, I think what he meant was all of my, you know, I've taken lots of pictures of artists, I've done lots of people's press shots, you know, more than you've even seen on my Instagram or my website. You know, I've got a whole archive of.
I believe it.
You know, I could tomorrow put out a book, but that, when I'm saying what would I put in it, it's me saying that's not art, because that's where I make my money.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. And
I almost feel bad saying this. I feel like I'm going to lose work, but fuck it. Fuck the preoccupation with survival. You know, like, my art has barely been explored yet. That's why I don't feel like I've earned my stripes as an artist.
Okay.
Because I haven't felt that I've had that much opportunity to take that plunge into freedom, which is what, you know, when I gave up the day job, when I was doing the book, I mean, the book, real talk, never made us a penny financially.
Yeah. Well,
but it was a springboard for more work. So to say that I haven't benefited from it financially is incorrect. But
it's similar to grime itself in those times.
Yeah.
Like, you look at it now, grime's growth and your career growth, it's like, grime never made any of those guys a penny back in the day, but now, you know, some people who have stuck at it and have continued to grow alongside it are doing all right.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same, I'm guessing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. But it was one of those situations where I just I made a decision, and that decision was fuck it. And actually, that is, you know, really, that's kind of like, let's go back to what is art. Art is the moment when you say fuck it. That's actually my answer to your first question, you know, because that is the moment at which you say, I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks about what I'm doing. I don't give a fuck about whether or not I make any money. I am driven to do this. There is nothing I can do to stop it now. It must be done. Fuck it, you know? And that is so brave that it is not, you know, and especially in the world we live in today. You know, there used to be a scenario where you could live in a bubble, you know, where you could really remove yourself, you know, and do you know what? You can now. I could take myself somewhere and I could live on the beach in a hut and I could throw my phone in the water.
Yeah.
But it's not realistic, you know?
It's not economic either.
Exactly. And it's also pretty archaic, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it is 2019. These things are surrounding us.
They can be extremely positive tools if used properly.
Exactly. You know, to not have the internet to research imagery.
Yeah.
Although saying that, you know, this year, in my 33rd year of life, I went and got myself a British Library card.
Nice.
Because I really do see the worth in the physical object. That brings me back to analog photography, you know, like my sort of reaction to digital photography is partly because I don't believe that my work is the same as that kind of instant gratification you get from me taking a picture of you now and uploading it to Instagram. You know, there is a process between, even if I can speed that process up by the people that I work with, that I can have it online in 2 hours, that's not what my work means to me. And I've completely forgotten what my chain of thought was. Where were we? Who fucking knows?
I'm just listening.
Fuck Instagram.
We're chasing that train.
Fuck it. Yeah, I'm still chasing that train.
But when you say to me, oh, I don't feel like I can say I'm an artist, what that says to me really underneath that is I'm hiding something.
Fucking hell.
Because if someone says, no, trust me, I don't deserve it, deep in the reservoir of the mind somewhere is a little bit of, I'm holding something back. But let's not talk about it, you know, let's just trust me, I don't deserve it. So I wonder what you feel like you would need to do in order for you to feel like it was a title that you deserved. Even though one time already you've stood up and gone, fuck it all, I'm doing what I need to do.
I know exactly the answer to that question, which I didn't think I was going to know. I didn't know it until you finished asking it. It's because I still care what people think. I really think that's the answer to that question. I still care what people think.
And are you saying that you can never be an artist while holding yourself ransom to the opinion of others?
Yes, because then even in moments when I think I am being free, I am ultimately at the mercy of my audience, you know, and you really are like a therapist, you know that. It's like uncanny, your way of like picking apart what somebody's saying. You're quite bold and brash with it as well. You ask quite bold questions. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that back at you because I'm like, okay, he's really, really going in. But yeah, you know, I think there comes a point where, you know, I have to recognize that it's not just my work. I care about what people think about me. And I think that has actually caused me, like, you know, I've been in conflict for quite a few years. You know, I'm like exhausted by the mental conflict that is going on with me. And it feeds into a lot of it's kind of taken root and fed into a lot of my life, my work, my personal life, you know, everything all thrown together. And even when I started to get more followers on Instagram, you know, which business-wise, you know, is really good. You've got more eyes on you. But on a personal level, my ability to be myself or post whatever the fuck I wanted to post went out of the window. And that didn't just happen overnight. It built up in a way that you don't realize it's happening until one day I looked at or I was analyzing the way that I was about to post or not post something and thought, oh, hold on a second. You're a person who thinks about whether or not you're going to post something now because there's, you know, 20,000 people looking as opposed to 15.
Yeah.
You know, and those 15 are like good friends who
know
wouldn't
you.
care anyway, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, you know, I think this is stuff that I would love to think that I would love to be able to say, I don't give a shit, but I do. And I think actually that's, you know, in everything in my life, in, you know, my sessions with my therapist, in my conflict I'm going through at the moment in my sort of, I feel like at the moment I'm in a period of like growth. I'm in a, when the graph is like that and then suddenly you have like a steep period of learning. I feel like I'm in one of those at the moment. And I feel like the ultimate conclusion or the place that I would like to get to is to free myself from the shackles of caring about what people think of me and what I'm doing. That's the reason why I don't want to paint, is because someone could turn around and say, the fuck? She thinks she's a painter now.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that,
Yeah.
And actually where I need to be is, I know that I'm a painter. So you saying that is lol to me.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing about judgment is that by the time, personally speaking, by the time I've presented you anything, I've already said everything you're going to say about it to myself. There's nothing that someone could...
I call it Eminemism.
Eminemism?
Yeah.
What, in the way that you will make a clown of yourself and use it as a weapon against everybody else. Yeah. It's I've been to hell and back with this piece of work.
Yeah.
And I know everything that's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the way I kind of freed myself from judgment, was like, I will tear anything I make to absolute shreds. And if on the other side of that, I still want to share it, then I'm free.
Yeah.
But the thing about judgment, again, is other people's judgment, the currency of that is validation. So even something like survival, I'm surviving on somebody else's terms. I'm not surviving because I truly want to live. I'm surviving because I want other people to know that I can. Which is like, then just my mere existence is to satisfy other people. And that for me is something that makes life meaningless.
Yeah.
Completely meaningless, because I'm not even in control of my own like being.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm as good as dead
in
that sense. So getting away from that is the most important thing for anybody. It's something, actually, forgive me for this, but I'm gonna go on my Twitter because it's something that was in my head quite a lot today, actually.
I love how you're like, like the meaning of life, and otherwise I should be dead. Let me just go on my Twitter and find it. It's very 2019 of you.
I think I deleted one of them, but it was, I said, when you are no longer looking for other people to provide you with anything, you're no longer afraid of their judgment. I give it all to the outside world and ask for nothing in return, except maybe the opportunity to give again. And I was just like, sat at my computer and I was working, and I was just like thinking about people's motivations. And when it comes down to it, like if you're not existing on your own terms, then what's the point? And it's so interesting that what you're coming out with is like is a confession, essentially, and you're like, I am a painter, and what does it take? The artist, what someone said to you the other day about if the artist doesn't have suffering, the only thing anybody ever suffers with is the repressed reality of themselves. Yeah, that's the only real suffering, right? The only way that anyone can be hurt is when your gift isn't being given or being received, whatever. And it's true because, oh no, wait, what am I fucking saying? We don't need to suffer. The artist doesn't need to suffer. You don't need to hit rock bottom. You don't need to completely self-destruct in order to go, I have nowhere else to go now apart from I am a painter.
Ooh, hold on. Okay, but I think the reason that so many people do, and that is, like literally tried and tested, we could sit here and think of a million examples, I think, of people who have, virtually almost self-destructed before they've created the masterpiece. Like, maybe that is because, the demons, the mob, society is so fucking against it. It's so strong, that pull back into validation, into instant gratification, into caring more about how it's received than caring about the making of it, That is so strong that I think for some people, and perhaps you know, to an extent, myself included, I even said to you, you know, I had to get to the point where I was not sleeping and I was not well before I said, fuck it, you know, because I couldn't just be brave and say, fuck it while I was well, because then, quite frankly, you know, my mum, there's a good example of a person, would have thought I was mad.
Yeah.
You know? Like, sorry, what do you mean, fuck it? Like, but, you know, you're getting paid to, like, what are you going to do? You know, it's all of these things that people say to you, you know, like, well, nobody might buy it. You might, like, never make any money again, you know, and the point is that if you're an artist, you say, I don't care, you know, and if you really mean that, you will be successful.
Yeah. It's the tortured artist archetype leading to a masterpiece of some sort is very valid, but it's very short-sighted in the sense of like all of human history and all of human capability, in the sense that we only know a masterpiece, or we can only define a masterpiece in reference to suffering. We don't know what a masterpiece looks like on the other side of joy, because all modern artistic creation has always been at the mercy of a judge. If we take it back to, let's say, when I say this, Western civilization, it's always tied to religion, God as the judge, which now, as we get further and further away from that idea, is now about the audience, is now about the paying customer. They take the place of God.
Yeah.
They decide whether it's good enough or not.
Yeah.
But before all of that, before there was any judge, there was pure joy and expression, and it just left the body, you know, like I'll
transcendental.
I'll use Rumi for an example. It's not about the reception. It's not about how it's revered. It's not about what you get in return. It's just given out of love, out of pure love. And you can read back those poems and they're immortal. And you can look at art, or you can read literature, like from any of these pre-Christian societies or whatever, pre-religion societies, and you can be like, these are immortal. These stand true because there is no judge. It's just true expression in whatever form that takes. But I feel like we might look at, or they might look at art in the future now and be like, wait, who were these for? Because they're so of the times.
Yeah.
And we can't find a place to look at them from.
Yeah.
Because we're not so judgmental. Hopefully we would have evolved into some kind of enlightenment or something. But
wishful thinking.
yeah, right? So it really is wishful thinking. But it's this connection between the product of art and the judge, and us thinking, well, we have to suffer for it. When being like, no, you don't have to go into a place again of self-denial. You don't have to get to a place of where you're like, oh, I'm not a painter, I'm not a painter, I'm not a painter. And the voice going, you are, gets louder and louder and louder. You've been there once. Do you have to go there again? Is it a thing of like a metronome where it swings that way and swings back, and it swings that way again, and you get closer and closer to the middle every time? Do we have to peel back these layers, like breakdown after breakdown, breakthrough after breakthrough? Or can we have one, see that place of darkness and be like, I'm not going to go back there again. I'm just going to notice, like I should have, well, not should have because you couldn't, like I might have in that instance of being like, I'm not going to repeat the cycle again because it's counterproductive. You don't need to push yourself into survival mode so much to be like, to get to that edge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. But I mean, you know, what you're suggesting, which sounds fucking brilliant, is the undoing of 33 years of, you know, it's exactly the same as psychoanalytic therapy that I'm doing, you know?
True.
Like, to undo those patterns that are so ingrained in human behavior. You know, everyone's got their own cycles that they go through, their own bullshit that they put themselves through. And yeah, you know, that's the goal. That is the goal. Whether or not that's even possible now
To
completely free yourself of the kind of element of judgment. Is that possible now in modern society?
well, I think the judge is always going to be there because even if it's just you in a studio, you're always going to start a piece of work and along the way be like, no, that's not good enough. Let me make another decision. All art is a series of choices.
Yeah.
And it's always a, yes, I'll do that because it's good, or no, I'll do that because it's bad. It's always a process of judgment internally, but I guess it's not really judgment because it's not condemning. It's like, no, it's like more like evolution. Like, no, that's not a strong idea. I'll take it somewhere else. So I think that process of elimination will still occur. But I definitely feel like it's it's possible for you to get to a point of where you see everything that you release into the world as a gift for somebody, and it's up to them whether they receive it or not. Your work is done on the release of it. Like, if you want to go religious with it, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, none of them ever received what they deserved in the giving of their message. You know, most of them were destroyed, most of them were ignored, most of them were called crazy. But the result is not the reward. The result is that you don't have to suffer in the suppression of your gift anymore. And if you can find your reward in just the ability to go, it's out, if you can find it in that, then you're free. If you can find it in the process, I guess is what I'm saying. If you can see the process as the reward, then you don't have to worry about the result.
Do you know, I think what is interesting is that you're very
deluded. Idealistic.
Yeah, definitely quite idealistic, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, I don't think, anyway. I was going to say very astute, because actually I think this can be seen in my photography especially, that actually I have always been so very nearly there, if that makes any sense. Like,
can I spit that back at you?
Yeah.
I think it's because you will allow someone in front of your lens to be them and not judge.
Yeah.
And you're able to give that space to somebody else, but not give it to yourself.
That's me through and through in all of my life. Yeah. Emotionally, you know, that is literally me to a T. You know, always, you know, but what I think is interesting is, you know, what you're saying about, what was it you said? The struggle is the suppression of
the gift.
You know, and I think perhaps there's been the wrong focus on what feels like the sort of struggle with my work and my photography and, you know, the things that I make, you know, and it's felt like the struggle was partly financial and partly, you know, et cetera, and actually, you know, ultimately under it all, I do know the answers, because it's those little things. It's the moments when I say, I just want to read a book, you know, and how completely wild that can be to somebody, that I've psychologically repressed my ability to read a book for like maybe 6 years now. That's a long time, you know. I can read a book in a day, you know, like I'd fucking love it. And what is interesting for me is that hasn't always been the case. It's like, as certain things have become freer in my career, or my, what's another word for career? My kind of experience of my work, other things have closed off. You know, it's like some doors open, other doors close. And it's not always been the case that I've been, and in fact, I think it's kind of the more attention I've had on me, the more judgment I've had, the harder it's been for me to free myself up again.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of dichotomy of my brain, is that you want that adoration, you get it inhibits you.
You realise that you're holding something back, which makes you feel like you're not worthy of the applause anyway.
So you say, fuck it, you make a masterpiece, you get more adoration,
And then you
And then
realize
the metronome.
there's another layer of yourself to release. Yeah.
But, you know, that's when I come back to the metronome, you know, like maybe that is the cycle. How do you break that cycle?
Well, actually, no. You don't want the metronome to stop, because the back and forth, the wave is life itself. So the only time the actual metronome starts becoming stationary is the point where you go, fuck it, slap, and then it starts swinging again.
Yeah.
And the game is to keep it in motion.
Yeah.
To keep it swinging. How can I add a little bit more momentum? How much further can I swing it? The aim is not to bring everything back into stasis.
Yeah.
It's to stretch out the frequency, I guess.
Yeah.
But obviously it's a fine line, because you can go way too far with it, and that being completely loose is the same as being completely tight. So
yeah.
There is a line to tiptoe, but it's a jolt to the system. How can I just push some more energy into it? And there'll always be layers, hopefully, to unpeel.
But I mean, that even that concept, the layers to unpeel, you know, there's so much fear to that. There's, you know, and I can't say this is for everyone, but I'm sure that's got to be in some ways universal. You know, the more layers you peel back, the more of myself I'm exposing to you, to anyone else who cares to look, you know. And the level of security you have to feel with yourself in order to, you know, it's kind of like being naked for the camera, you know, the level of security you have to feel to offer the deepest, innermost part of yourself when it is ultimately going to be judged whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
That just seems like wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
But maybe let's say you peel one more layer off from yourself, underneath that you realize there is no self to expose anyway, and then you're like,
what, there's just nothingness?
I wouldn't say nothingness, but this idea of a self, you know, like this idea of identity or whatever, it's so temperamental and it's so material and it's so dependent on so many things that if you were to peel it away and be like, oh, there's no self, there's nothing to be afraid of, there is only what is. Like, there's no divide, there's no barriers between anything. So you peel it back and you're like, oh, I can just keep peeling and peeling and peeling whenever I find an edge. Like, now you found an edge, you're like, I know that if I pull this rug, if I peek through this curtain, there is something else. And the fear is, what if I just keep peeking and peeking and peeking and it never ends and it's just madness? You peek through and suddenly you realize you're in this fucking wildland.
Yeah, but I don't think that can possibly be. There's always going to be another layer. It's not possible for it to be finite because people aren't finite, and time and experience determines that people are not finite, you know?
But art is the interplay of a finite being's experiences with the infinite.
What the fuck are we talking about? Sorry, say that
I don't
again.
know. I mean, this coffee is...
Art is the what? Is the interplay.
Art occurs, shall I say?
Yeah.
Art occurs at the interplay of a finite being. At the intersection of a finite being's experience with the infinite.
Fucking hell.
Which is basically me saying that your art, if you painting, which would be at this point the purest expression of yourself, the self being the soul being immortal. Mm-hmm. So it's you staring at this immortal version of yourself and kind of doing something, whatever feels natural, and then turning it back to people like a mirror. Like, well, I went to that place, I looked at myself, and this is what came out.
Yeah.
You can't judge it because it's just what happened. Like, for me anyway, I believe that all the greatest pieces of art is when people confront that void in themselves. People can say it's a void and a singularity are like the same thing. Everything and nothing is the same thing. So it's like they're equally as maddening. But that's where the greatest art comes from for me. Where my favorite photographers are ones who I'll use film because I have a fresher knowledge, like Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal.
Yeah.
Probably one of the greatest films of all time, because it's a filmmaker, it's an artist who's been able to peek into that part of themselves, let it drive them wild, and then come back with the questions.
Yeah.
So it's the interplay between me and my mortal self, this body, this flesh, this hair, this receding hairline, these crow's feet, like all of these sagging and decaying parts of me.
Oh, God, you really don't give yourself a good name, but carry on. Yeah.
Looking past that into my forever youthful spirit and this childlike impulse to life, to creativity, and be like, what are you? How do I capture you? How do I let you speak? How do I do all of those things? And art is the product of that conversation, for me, anyway. And
fucking hell.
But it's crazy. It will send you to crazy places, and I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting it to anybody, because it's a fucking heavy load to carry, which which is why you're going, I'm a painter, but that's for tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's for when tomorrow comes. And it's a heavy load for anybody to carry, which is, again, part of the motivation for this podcast of being like, you, Olivia, are capable of carrying it. You are capable of...
It's really weird, because I feel like you're pushing me to be better, but at the same time critiquing me, which I'm finding difficult.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's bad. Like, this is all the stuff that I love and like thrive off essentially in life. But it's just a really interesting space to be in.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially we're not speaking just to each other. We're speaking to be recorded.
Yeah.
So that someone else might listen.
Yeah.
And receive.
Yeah.
And ultimately judge what we're saying.
Yeah.
Or how our conversation is developing, which is in itself, for me, like a bizarre place to be having all of these feelings. And
yeah, for sure. It's I get it.
Yeah.
It kind of perverts the experience again. It's like having a live therapy session.
Yeah, and I almost, like there's a part of me that's thinking, should I be saying these things? Because, does it make me sound a way, or A, B, and C? And, does then it make my work seem like what I've done today isn't authentic? And these are the things that are real time now running through my head. And that is what you are saying is the ultimate experience, is to fucking take those and chuck them away.
Well, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying abandon your
no,
life
of course,
thus far. But I'm also saying that's what's made you so compelling and made you such a comfortable space for other artists.
Yeah.
So actually, this is the reason why it's you who's able to do that.
Yeah.
That's the common ground that I guess that you're seeing with your subjects. Is that people, I don't know, that's what I'm projecting too much, I guess, into that. But I've expected to come and have a conversation with a photographer and a filmmaker, and actually what you've presented to me and what you've said is, I'm actually neither of those things.
Yeah.
I'm a painter, but please don't tell anybody.
Lol.
And I'm not drawing... you've admitted that. I'm not drawing that... I haven't manipulated you in any way.
No, you haven't. You haven't.
And I'm not lying.
Or maybe even not a painter, but like, I'm an artist. Don't tell anyone that.
Yeah. But the word you used was painter.
Yeah.
Which is, that's... Freud would have his own field day with that.
Freud would have a field day with like 90% of the things that we've said today. But yeah, no, I hear you.
So you must want this conversation to happen at some point, otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
You wouldn't offer that experience, and I wouldn't know about any of this anyway.
No, I agree. And I mean, that's psychoanalytical 101. What you've just said, is like, if you don't say it out loud. And I think that maybe the thing that has been maybe kind of not unique to me, but something that I know is a specific and I consider to be quite a special trait of mine is that I'm not afraid to be honest with people, and I'm not afraid to say I'm scared of being an artist, and I'm not afraid to say I don't quite feel like I've got there yet. And I think that that is exactly what creates a safe space for the person I'm photographing or documenting to be themselves in, because they then realize that, you know, I haven't come into it with any sort of arrogance. You know, there's no part of me saying, I'm the photographer, this is what we're doing today. You know, I'm like, hi, I'm a person, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure you don't either, Mary J. Blige. What are we going to do today? You know, and immediately that person is like, oh, I'm a person. Oh, what would I do as a person? You know, and not as Skepta or as, you know, the kind of Sasha Fierce persona that people put on themselves, especially talent, but also any regular human being, you know, who comes into, you know, take a portrait session as an example. You know, even walking through that door is a, you know, you're walking into an unknown, you're walking into a space where someone's about to kind of like capture a part of you. And, you know, you walk in there, I'm sure most people do, I know I would, thinking, right, I've designed my face this way today, I've put my hair how I wanted it to be, and, you know, my job is to get you to say, oh, fuck it, and, you know, kind of relax, and have the moment when you look the most yourself, as opposed to the moment when you are trying to present a version of yourself to other people. So what is the most astute thing that you have kind of picked up on of me is that I'm the one behind that camera. You know, like, I've thought a lot about taking self-portraits and what that would mean with my camera, you know.
And that was a question I had in my
Really?
bank. I was waiting to be like, have you got an archive of self-portraits?
I mean, you know, like, I've got the interesting thing is, you know, like, I've got a fucking massive archive of selfies.
Yeah.
And that's something that for me is flippant, you know, because it's been taken on my phone, and, you know, someone like me doesn't think that a phone is art, you know. Yeah. Although there's another part of me that does, but that's another conversation for another day, you know. So it's almost like I've not allowed myself to be worthy of my own lens. And there's another part of me, you know, my lab has always said, oh, we've seen all of our photographers naked because they all do naked pictures of themselves and send them into the lab, right? And there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to be like everyone else. So there's a part of me that reacts against things that are actually, you know, there's a potential for that actually being like a necessary part of the process. And, you know, the fact that other people have gone through that and been through that part of the process, you know, kind of turning your lens on yourself, is interesting in itself. And actually, I think what I'm flying off the seat of my pants here. Thoughts are just coming as I'm talking.
I'll catch you.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is that even while I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about the final image and thinking, yeah, but why would anyone want to see pictures of me? But that isn't the point. And it's exactly what I was saying to you earlier about wanting to change not what's in front of the lens, but wanting to change who's behind the lens. Because that is the point. The point is that I have turned the camera on myself, and the outcome is no one else will look at it how I look at it. And I will look, it's just like any picture that you see of yourself, or as a photographer, I know this better than anyone. The picture that I love of a person is not always the one that they like of themselves. Yeah. Because you have a very specific way of critiquing your own photograph. You know, that bit of your nose that you don't like, that you've never liked, might be really prominent in this picture, and you can't see the wood for the trees. Yeah,
so it's what fits your impression of yourself.
Exactly.
Your idea of yourself.
Exactly. And I think that that's like, you know, the idea of self-portraiture, I've always known that that is something that I know it would free me in some way. But the fear of what's going to be in the image at the end supersedes that little artist person inside me that's going, do it.
Could that potentially be why your lens falls mostly on men?
I don't know. I'd never really considered it in that way.
Okay.
I think I'm not saying it's not correct. I'm processing what you've said because I think it's quite interesting. I think initially it was more about, you know, as a photographer, you turn your lens on what you find attractive, you know? And I think that male photographers, especially in fashion photography throughout history, you know, they've kind of been able to turn their lens frequently, like look at Helmut Newton, really good example, on mostly women and nude women and the kind
Terry
of women
Richardson,
that he likes.
you know, like
exactly,
look any of those guys.
And not be questioned about it.
But also the male's ability for self-reflection is also a bit diminished. Let's be real. So that is almost expectant. Like that's so symptomatic of masculinity itself, of the fear of turning, of sitting another man down and being like, well, this is at least one half of a mirror. Or, you know, like, so it is symptomatic, but I do completely understand.
And I think you're probably very right, you know, with what you said. It's just, it's something that I'd never even thought of myself. And actually what I've been enjoying about, you know, like exactly like you said, I shoot more and more women each and every day, you know, and I think what I have enjoyed about that experience is there's a certain like solidarity, there's a certain trust that is created like woman to woman that is kind of not replicated in a situation where I'm photographing a man, for example. You know, it's like a different set of skills come into play, a different set of interpersonal skills come into play.
Yeah.
And when I'm photographing a man, I suppose it's potentially less about making them feel comfortable and more about making them feel. And with a woman, I feel much more concerned with making them feel comfortable. I don't feel the need as much to challenge them. And I wonder if that actually in its very nature, by, you know, the sort of history of who has been, you know, big name I know we've got people like Ellen von Unwerth, you know, but if we sat here now and thought of the first 10 photographers that came to mind, they'd probably be men, or mostly men. And I wonder if actually the very fact, again, that it's a different eye and a different way of seeing is, like I said, with men, I feel that they are challenged. With women, I want to make them comfortable. Well, if men have been shooting for all these years, then maybe they've been challenging the women and making the men feel comfortable. And so that's a direct reverse. You know, I can't speak for everyone, but I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And whichever side of the fence I'm sitting on at that particular moment is still an interesting new way of approaching either the same sex or the opposite sex. And I think especially in my pictures of men, I'm challenging tropes of masculinity.
Yeah.
And that, I've never been able to articulate this how I feel that I'm about to or have just done. And that is where I'm imposing my femininity onto them in exactly the same way that someone like Helmut Newton, with those beautiful nudes or beautiful empowered images of women, you know, he was actually imposing his attraction, his masculinity, his, you know, on those women.
Well, it's interesting because with the male-female dichotomy, it's interesting because it feels like it almost always leads back to desire, which is another manifestation of judgment.
Yeah.
But then in your same-sex sittings, it's more about reflection for the sake of reflection.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because I don't know where I'm going with this because I'm just making it up as I'm going, but how do we, or maybe now we're getting more to a point of where it's always about making somebody else feel more comfortable. I don't know. I saw
Yeah.
a talk of yours where you were like, I wanted to turn my lens on people that I fancied, blokes that I fancied.
Yeah.
But then actually, as you've just established, is that as you've grown, it's more about actually imposing your femininity onto masculine tropes.
Yeah.
And being like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Be yourself
Yeah.
in all your glory.
Yeah.
Not be an object of my desire.
Yeah.
Don't be what I want you to be or what
Yeah.
you think I want you to be. Be you.
Yeah.
So that's more of a cultural thing, I'm guessing, which is probably tied in with things like inclusive sets and representation
Yeah.
and a greater understanding of the spectrum of human experience.
Yeah.
But taking away this, taking away the desire, taking away the judgment, and just allowing what is to be.
Yeah.
Which is difficult for any artist, for any photographer, even as a woman, to sit in front of another woman and not see what you might wish you were,
Yeah.
or all of the things that you could be,
Yeah.
and just see them for who they are. And I guess that only comes from a place of real happiness or acceptance of who that photographer is. And the same with a man,
Yeah.
not to look at another man and be challenged or provoked with all of the things that you could be.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's this idea of not projecting yourself onto them. Like Richard
Yeah.
Avedon would say, like, none of my photos are true because they're all just pictures of me.
Yeah.
Like, and none of them are pictures of them.
Yeah.
But is there a way? Maybe he was really unsatisfied with who he was as a person. I don't know. Or maybe he was so happy that is the truth.
Yeah.
But
But I think that both of those things can be true. And I don't think that it's like I've always said, people sometimes ask me about why I shoot how I shoot with not much tech and not much lighting, and I try and keep it simple, and that for me unclutters the creative space, and then therefore unclutters the sort of expectational space that you are putting your sitter in. But that does not mean that my images are any more truthful than someone who puts a shit ton of kit around deliberately to put their model or their sitter completely out of whack and off balance, because that is their truth.
yeah.
And actually I think what Avedon says is probably the ultimate truth, because I can't take a picture of you and not be present to take the picture of you. I have to in some way impose myself on you, even if it's me making the micro decision to move the camera slightly to the right. Doesn't matter what expression you're making, I can decide to shoot you from below and make you look taller and stronger. I can decide to come in very close and only focus on your right eye,
You're showing what you want to be shown.
Exactly. So, and ultimately you can bring that back to, which might be interesting with this whole I'm a painter thing on the other side, is photography truthful? It's been the art form that has taken the longest to be taken seriously. And I think I find that frustrating, and I also find that frustrating in the context of the world that we live in today, where everyone walks around with a camera in their pocket. Photography has never been really respected in the same way that, painting or sculpture or, other sort of mediums have been respected. And it's a very recent thing that it has,
Could you make an argument for a reason why it wouldn't be? If you were to see their side of the coin.
Yeah, which I can in many ways, like a photograph is one, it's what you said earlier, it's one stop frame, it's one captured moment of a scenario. If you take sculpture as an example, that's might not take many weeks, but it's a day's craft working with your hands, like building and manipulating something. And you know, with photography, it is quite a removed medium in many ways. And I think that for that reason, there is definitely a distinction between what fine art photography and any regular photography is. And I think that perhaps that is the problem, you know, because there's very few people who just do some painting, you know. If you're a painter, you're a painter. Does that make sense? You know, in the same way that nowadays we've all got a camera on our phone, so we take photographs all the time, whether or not we're a photographer. And I would say that there's a lot of people, many more than who are kind of pretending to be a painter or a sculptor, because it's a much more difficult sort of process to go through, or medium to work with. It's not so available to us.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to pretend.
Exactly. So I do get frustrated by people who I feel are pretending to be photographers, you know, who aren't necessarily doing it for what I consider to be the right reasons. But, you know, ultimately, I think the reason that, you know, we have now got photography curators at massive galleries and, you know, it is becoming more accepted is because there will always be a group of people or a section of photography that is fine art photography, no matter what the sort of what the reasons behind it. And I think that again comes back to talent, and there is something innate. It's like singing, you know, like you can teach anyone to sing, but not everyone could be a singer. There is something X factor, something special, and special again is a difficult word because that's not something I care to attribute to myself.
Yeah.
But there is something extra that turns something from a photograph into a fine art photograph, and it's nothing to do with the equipment or the technique or the lighting.
So what is it then? What's present in
it's the photographer.
Okay.
It's their way of seeing, you know, because I wouldn't, and actually it goes back to, you know, when I said it's a conversation for another day, because you can have a fine art photographer whose medium is the iPhone. I believe that is entirely possible. Can't think of an example of one, but, you know, that is entirely possible. For me, maybe actually something that holds me back in a sense of the availability of the image is the fact that I am so concerned with an analog process. And that's not to say that it's not right for me to be an analog photographer. That's something that I know is the truth for me, is analog photography. I have no interest in it when there is no process of alchemy, when there's no physical object at the end, when I don't have a filing cabinet full of negatives that I will save if my house is burning down. Everything else can go. They're coming with me, you know? And for me, that is my truth. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Just keep going. Keep following it.
Just keep going with the thread. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, I can understand why photography has not always been considered to be.
Do you feel like film, even though it was later than photography, do you feel like film was more respected off the bat than photography was?
Film as in moving image?
Yeah. I guess as in cinema. Well, not just film cinema, but the moving image.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, that's if you want to look at kind of artistic processes, there is no way to make cinema without many processes being involved. And I think that is what kind of has it. Again, it almost brings us back to the struggle. You know, has a photographer struggled enough to get their one image? You know, if all they did was go out with a camera and click a button.
Yeah.
You know, a cinematographer has not a cinematographer, a director, let's say a director, has come up with an idea. They've worked with a script writer. The script has been given to actors and actresses who have been cast. They have then been dressed. They've learnt their lines. That has then all been brought together under the umbrella of the director, who's onboarded a cinematographer.
Is there a ritual, essentially?
Exactly.
Is there a ceremony?
Exactly. And I think that's always been easier to respect because it's, you know, it's so obvious that that's part of that process. But, you know, I think actually even talking about this now, I wonder if that for me is why I would feel more authentically an artist if I was painting. You know, I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive of each other. You know, there's definitely one feeds into the other, you know, that maybe I feel like I'm not an artist because I don't go through those processes because, you know, it's kind of, for me, one of the scariest things about that word artist is saying it if I'm not it. The one thing I never want to be, whether it's photography, whether it's any other medium, is that person who's pretending to be. And so I think in a way, if I don't say that word and don't attribute it to myself, that's almost one of my ways of being an artist, you know, is not wanting to, you know, because there are ways and ways of saying things. And I think I already said that once, you know, I think there's a way and a way of saying I'm an artist. And one is coming from a place of great confidence and belief in what you're doing. And one is coming from a place of arrogance and coating a lie almost.
Yeah. Well, again, it's intention, right?
Exactly.
It's all about, do you want validation?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be honest?
Yeah.
Do you want to express yourself? And,
yeah.
And again, it circles back to just saying I'm an artist doesn't mean something good.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Totally. And I think what's interesting is, you know, like our analogy of the metronome and this kind of weird place in the middle, which, you know, I almost through this conversation I'm understanding more and more that I'm kind of sitting there somewhere at the moment, is because I absolutely truthfully want to make honest, authentic work, but I am also concerned with the validation of that work. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm lying, that I'm being arrogant about what I'm doing, that I'm pretending to be an artist. It's like I haven't reached a point where I've been able to tip the scale the other way. And so maybe my judgment of those people who I consider to not be real photographers, who are getting more validation than their artistry.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have that judgment against them because maybe they're just somewhere else on this scale of when they are able to tip themselves out, or maybe not, you know, like I can't answer that question, but it's an interesting one to think about, you know, in light of what we've said to each other.
I don't remember asking a question, so
I mean, I don't think you've asked a single question. Like, to be fair, this conversation has flowed pretty organically. So
when we were speaking about well, it's funny. The photographer is always present.
Yeah.
To steal a Marina
Abramovich. Yeah.
It's the way that Dali approached it, which was like put the self-timer on and then just throw it in the air and it captures whatever it captures.
Yeah.
This idea of trying to remove the person on the other side of the camera, which again is manifested in the self-portrait almost.
Yeah.
That you take away the observer.
Yeah.
And you just have the observed.
Yeah.
It's interesting how photography is the only medium where that kind of can happen.
Yeah.
You can't have a painting without a painter.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the basis of postmodern art.
Yeah.
Right? It's how can I remove myself from this process as much as possible?
Yeah.
Which is where you get the Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Which is where you get the Yves Klein. You get all of these people who are just either scattering or covering themselves in paint and jumping on a canvas. It's like, how can I get out of the way?
Free flow.
Yeah, how can I get out of the way as much as possible? And I don't think that served us really. I don't think I think it's been a good experiment. I think it's come out of trauma, almost post-war,
Yeah.
post-evil Hitler,
Yeah.
whatever. I think it's not come from a positive place, but it's given us a good point of reference.
Yeah.
I don't think it's served us, and it's trying to bring us back from absence, but in a loving way, like a loving absence.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I know exactly what you mean.
Instead of like how do we...
Clinical absence.
Yeah, how do we be there, but not be there at the same time?
Well, that is what I do. That's, and the answer to that is, again, it depends. I'm thinking beyond what I'm saying. It depends what you are photographing or painting or sculpting. But my job, what I believe is the most important thing about what I do is being present, being lovingly present, being non-judgmentally present, but also not being there at all, not being so present that someone else can't have a visual voice. And that's what I was saying about my assistants before. They're there, but they're invisible because they aren't stepping into that moment with me and who I'm photographing. So being present and being not present, it's almost like my dichotomy as an artist, It's, like life and personality and humanity is kind of a game of manipulation. And that's a word that has a really negative connotation to it.
But all it means is the ability to mold.
Yeah. And it's everything that we do every day. Like I try and make a point if I'm buying some milk in the morning to say hello to whoever it is that I'm buying milk from, like that's part of my daily existence, is that I would like to think that I am spreading some kindness and warmth and, personal interaction in situations where sometimes definitely in inner city London or urban environments, we certainly forget to do that. We're so busy doing something else that we forget to go up to the stranger crying on the street and say, are you okay? Regardless of what their reaction is going to be. They might tell you to fuck off. That's fine. They might need a hug. That's also fine. But I'm that person who I'm trying to make sure that as I'm traveling through life, I'm manipulating the situations, and that can be a positive thing as much as it can be a negative thing. I'm not necessarily trying to do you over. I'm not trying to get one over you when I'm photographing you, but I am manipulating who I am so that you are more comfortable in my presence, and that is how I feel that I'm there but not there, because me, Olivia Rose, might not necessarily be present. I am internally, and I suppose essentially I'm going really like
go all the way,
wild,
cosmic,
but cosmic with it.
In my house, they call it astral realm. Whenever I go there, they're like, "Oh, he's gone astral."
Astral realm, yes. Like that. Olivia Rose will always be behind my eyeballs. I can't remove her from there. I mean, she is directly inside that brain, But who I'm presenting to you is who I need to be for you to be your truest self. And that, I suppose, is the art in the photography. That's what I've always, and I've articulated it differently, again, because I've manipulated this conversation for different audiences. But when I'm with someone who is thinking in the astral realm, then I can see it in that way, which is, my ability to manipulate me and who I'm presenting to you is my ability to get the picture I need to get from your most authentic self, which is just so complicated.
Yeah, because
but so simple at the same time.
Yeah.
It's the most simple thing. It is what we all do every single day.
Well, hopefully. Well, yeah.
No, we do. We can't, you can't help it.
Sometimes not for the best. And
exactly. Yeah, it can be negative, it can be positive.
So in this painting, photography dichotomy or conflict or duality or whatever it can be called, do you feel like the camera's in the way?
That's what, interestingly, it was one of the first things my therapist ever said to me, which has kind of not come up again, but occasionally bothers me, that she said something about the camera's in the way. You know, like, that's a safe place for me to be, is behind the camera.
I don't know if I'm saying it in a similar way, because I'm imagining the alternative to be you sat behind an easel. It's not the hiding that I'm talking about. It's more the seeing your subject and allowing that information to pass straight onto a canvas, which you have a tactile connection with, as opposed to being filtered through and manipulated by the lens instead of by your hand. So less of a...
Interesting.
I guess the photograph is a way more esoteric representation and also more detached representation, even though it's so accurate. Because it's come through this mechanical eye as opposed to your biological hand. Like as a direct
it's very true.
impulse of the brain.
The visceral
exactly.
You know, expression.
So is that actually, it's not necessarily about you being a painter, but your desire to feel the experience of somebody else so viscerally?
Oh, I've just never thought about it. I don't know. Yes, I suppose is the answer to that question. Like, yes, there's obviously a reason why, I think the interesting thing is that my dad's a photographer, and he's somebody that
is interesting. Tell me more.
I have a tumultuous relationship with that guy, Uncle Dad, and he's a successful photographer. He's taken some amazing pictures, and he also has work in the National Portrait Gallery. It's why I've dropped my surname from, Olivia Rose is not my full name.
Okay.
Rose is my middle name. I dropped my surname because I didn't want any foot up because of my dad's name. And I fought photography tooth and nail. I went and did a foundation degree at Central St Martin's, and I wanted to be anything but a photographer, textiles, fine art, anything. And I applied for many different degree courses and was rejected from all of them apart from photography. And it's like my whole journey, all roads have led to photography. And I suppose there is an astral realm way of thinking about this, that my fight to get away from photography meant that it was so constantly present in my mind that I have landed in it, which again, I've never even thought about until we sat down here today. But I think also that the interesting thing is that I was so knocked back by the rejection of all of those other subjects, in a way that you take someone like Alexander McQueen, who like flunked out and said fuck it and went on to be like one of the greatest geniuses in fashion. I could have done that, but I didn't.
Oh well, not in fashion, but you have done that.
Well, don't put me in a par with Alexander McQueen.
Well, not it's
ridiculous.
But you still excel in your
but I excel in what
what
essentially I was validated in.
Oh, okay.
You know, that was the course that chose me.
Oh,
if you
okay.
want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
You know, the fine art course, the textiles course, you know, all of these other things that, you know, I can draw. If I sat here and drew you over the 2 hours that we've been talking, it would be a pretty accurate representation in some way of you. I can paint, I can sew, I can, you know, that creativity runs through me. It's in my blood, it's in my being. You know, the medium I choose, and I say this a lot, currently is photography. I've never felt in love with photography. That's why when I found directing, and again, I fell into that, literally like stumbled out of one room into another, I felt like I'd come home because finally I got to be a creative, but I didn't have to have the fucking camera anymore.
Okay.
Because actually the camera's difficult, you know, it's not my most natural. I'm learning so much about myself and it's kind of annoying. You know, the camera is a difficult technical piece of equipment in a way that a paint and a paintbrush is not difficult, if that makes sense. Like, well, to understand a camera, you have to read a manual or you have to practice it loads. I suppose in that sense, it is the same. You know, like, but if I just gave you a camera and you had zero knowledge of a film camera, could you expose any images? I'm not sure. You know, you'd have to know what settings to put things on.
Yeah.
In a way that if I gave you a paintbrush and some paints, you could paint a painting, whether it was good or bad. I mean, again, that's up to opinion. But
yeah, but it's all about how the question isn't like take a photo. It's about how could you accurately represent what it is that you see.
Yeah.
So to do that with a camera still takes however many hours to learn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of
you when you
course.
took your first photo versus you now, the ability to capture what it is that you're seeing.
Yeah.
Just like if you were to start really going seriously with painting tomorrow, in 10 years, you'd be like, oh, I thought that painting was easy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, but you know, I don't actually think I'm saying painting's easy. What I'm saying is you can't operate a camera without some technical knowledge.
Okay.
And that was the thing that for me, I have no interest in that technical knowledge.
Yeah.
It's why I've never cared about the studio, never cared about fuck flash. The light comes from the sun or the lamp or the, you know, and that has always been my ethos. And I think actually in photography and the way that I've applied that to photography, is what has made my work feel to others more like art than someone else's photography, because I've been utterly stubborn on that, because I can't do it any other way.
Yeah.
Because you know, in order to learn how to use studio flash beautifully, you have to be interested in technology, and that's not one of my interests.
Yeah.
So that is why, on a really literal level, I stepped into directing, and it was everything I loved about photography: interacting with people, manipulating myself to manipulate them, trust, the delicate game and dance that we play when we're doing those things. But I didn't have to give a fuck about the camera anymore. Mm. And actually, you know, is that the be all and end all for me? I don't know. You know, is there another medium that I need to pick up? You know, like over the summer when I've got a family in Bermuda, and I was over there for a friend's wedding. And for the first time in many, many years, I took a sketchbook and I took a pencil and I was drawing people. And I don't even know what the end of the sentence is, but there was something beautiful about that for me. And they're not drawings that I want to show people. They're not, you know, it wasn't done for any reason. It just was, and it just happened. And yeah, maybe I need to get back to that place a little bit more. And maybe that will make me a better photographer ultimately.
Well, yeah, I'm guessing it would just make you better at all of your expression, whether it's filmmaking, photography. I found that delving deeper into my art is at the same time delving deeper into myself, which makes me able to communicate better.
Yeah.
Conversation is as much of an art form as any of these other crafts.
Yeah.
So even just being able to express yourself in a conversation is like motivation enough to do it for me. But it is interesting, like what, obviously you wouldn't, because of time, you wouldn't be able to do it for money, but like what's stopping you from sitting opposite Georgia Smith with an easel and a thing, you know, like, but yeah, it's really
but
interesting.
I think actually what you just said about conversation, you know, like I'm quite self-aware in terms of what my sort of skills are, and although I might not be comfortable to say I am an artist, I will tell you that I am articulate.
Yeah.
And I'm totally happy to say that. That's why I like
articulate.
Yeah, I'm articulate.
No,
babes.
articulate.
Art.
The word art is an articulate. I've never thought about that either.
We need to look that up later because there's definitely a reason.
And art is, well, art. The etymology of art is basically just means a skill that has been repeated so much that it's now become an art. So it's like, yeah. But I actually thought it was something to do with heart, and it was something to do. That's what I thought. Which then, if
art is in heart.
Yeah, but I thought it was something to do with heart etymology wise. Which then, if you take articulate as being communication and the to clearly express from the heart. That would be what articulate means.
Or also the repetitive art of communication.
Yeah,
you know, it's a learned experience, isn't it?
True.
So, but you know, like that is actually, you know, whether that has come through me being a photographer or whether that has been one of the reasons why that is the medium I've chosen, I don't know. But I do know that for me, those two things are completely linked. You know, my ability to straight off the bat feel comfortable to have any kind of conversation with anyone.
Yeah.
It's one of the joys of my life, you know, is, and I don't care who it is. I sit next to someone on the bus, and if they're willing to have a good old chat with me, I'll have a good old chat with them about anything.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like a chatty Uber driver's dream because I will do that.
You are a 5-star rider.
5-star rider, yeah. But, you know, I think actually maybe, you know, I wonder if that's part of why I do what I do. You know, because I wonder if I could... Or I wonder if it even makes a difference. You know, I'm thinking about sitting there with an easel and painting Georgia Smith. And would I then be able to be the same conversationalist? And actually, yeah, I would, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
But would she be able to respond?
Who knows? But it would create an opportunity at least. It's very different.
But it's interesting because when I think about painting, I don't think about painting other people.
Okay.
I would paint myself, and the times that I have painted, you know, I've got a couple of self-portraits here and there, you know, like they're kind of hidden away. They're not...
Well, then that's okay, that's interesting.
Because that's, you know, when I think about photography, I never think about wanting to photograph myself. I would like to photograph other interesting people. But painting, I can't imagine painting someone else.
That's interesting.
What do you make of that, Mr. Psychoanalyst?
Well, no, I didn't know what you visualized when you said, you know, I'm a painter, and
You're so fixated on that. I'm not a painter. I'm an artist-ish.
But
I'm a person who doesn't know what medium she might end up with.
Yeah, I do feel like maybe I've attached too much to it, but it is also the way you described yourself instinctively. Which was interesting and shattered my presuppositions, which is probably why I'm holding on to it so much. But it's then in that sense, it's that if you only imagine painting yourself and you also refer to yourself as a painter, or you feel like maybe that's something you need to do, then it's just that the thing you feel you need to do is look at yourself a bit more.
Yeah.
I think you just need to take a series of self-portraits, to be honest. Like at this point, at this point, you know, it's like the only logical, logical next step.
Yeah.
I think I want to finish on the art form itself, because this has been a very personal conversation.
Yeah.
And for ways of seeing, how do you identify a great photo from just a photo? What is present in a great photo that is not present in a photo?
Emotion.
Okay.
Feeling.
Okay. How does one read that in a photo?
Well, it's like saying, how do you read authenticity in a picture? It's not measurable. And for that reason, just like any art, there are differing opinions on what is great and what's not great. I mean, on a basic, you know, slightly less emotive level, for me, a great photograph is always about the composition. And it's about what you do with the negative space as much as it's about what you do with the positive space. But a truly great image will make the person viewing it feel something. So that is not to say that the image itself has captured emotion. It's that the person who views it feels something. And I suppose that would be my answer across the board with music, with, you know, with any kind of art form or medium. And I really believe that when you can feel something from what you're looking at, that means it's been created with great integrity and with great authenticity, whether it's the sitter that's been authentic or the photographer. Either way, somehow that is present in the image.
And what photographs can you think of that have, this is a twofold question, that you looked at? Actually, wait. Your dad's photography.
Oh, yeah.
Could you identify great emotion in that?
Yeah.
Is that where you learnt it? Or was that where you realised, oh, this is a very great vehicle for emotion?
No, because I think when my dad was around and when his sort of photography was kind of present, there's kind of a gap in my life for when his photography was kind of present and sort of known to me or a point of interest to me. It's come back now. It was there when I was much younger. So, maybe in my early life, I understood the importance of photography to him, and that's an emotional connection. So, I'm sure I was in some way influenced by that. But I realized, I think what made me sort of realize my emotional connection to photography was actually at university. Like, when I was, like I said, I didn't want to be a photographer. It was like anything else.
Anything but.
Yeah. And when I got onto this fashion photography course, God, not even photography, mate. It was fashion. I was like, oh my God, like nothing could be more pithy and irrelevant to fine art than fashion photography, So I was like, this is absolutely the fucking pits. I tried to get onto a journalism course. I was like, fuck this art stuff. I can also write, like, fuck it, I'll go and be a writer. And I actually got a place on this journalism course. And it was just as I was going into my second year, a tutor came and changed my entire perspective on photography, because he said to me, you're the only one in this class that, because you just don't give a fuck about the photography, is doing something really authentic. I was taking pictures at the time of all of my gay friends, and I was writing my dissertation on being a fag hag. What does it mean to be the woman with all of the gay friends? And I was documenting them on Polaroid because, that was just kind of the medium that I'd picked. It was instant, but it was still film, and it was tactile and imperfect and all of the things that I love as an artist. And it was him who made me realize that I do have an emotional connection to what I'm doing in a way that a lot of other people on that course didn't. People who I thought were much better than me because they were achieving a much more like social standard accepted form of photography. And that's why I've always been really stubborn about the way I shoot. Because if you want something to feel like my photography, if your whole mood board is my images, then it has to be shot how I shoot. Because I can't make that with £10,000 worth of lights. Yeah. And, what was the second part of the question? Oh, can I tell you an image that I think conveys that?
Yeah.
What's the best example of this? Well, when I was talking about it, I was thinking of Diane Arbus, and it's the shot of there's a little white boy in braces holding a grenade, or is it 2 grenades in his hand? And it's like slightly fisheye. There's like light dappled on the floor. He's got this bizarre expression and he's holding his body in a strange way. And it's just the very simple juxtaposition of what this boy looks like, the innocence of his youth, the violence of a grenade, the fact that he's holding it like a toy. You cannot look at that image and not feel something, have some kind of opinion on what you think it means or it is.
And which of your photos do you feel like you've got closest? Like,
I knew you were going to ask this. I literally knew it was coming. I mean, I suppose I should probably go with the one that just kind of instantly came into my mind. The cover shot for the Guardian Guide with Skepta that I took, where he's got his eyes closed, and there was a moment in that shoot when I took that picture that there was some peace that came over him, very brief moment of it. And I feel like when you look at it, you look at a strong black man who has had my white femininity expressed upon him. And I don't even mean that in a sort of forced and negative way. There are a lot of people who will think that's negative in itself, but he was willing to receive that and be it for me.
Yeah.
And ultimately for himself.
Yeah.
And that is something that I feel like it really translates in that image. It was an image that, I sort of keep coming back to. But inversely, in that same set of pictures, there's another image where he very much off his own back did this. He was shirtless and he kind of did this thing where he put one hand in front of the other. And when you actually look at the image, it feels almost like a boxing stance, but there's no fist. It's a stop, don't, and there was a very, there was a very powerful like muse and photographer connection between us when we did that shoot. And it evolved over the day that we were shooting. And what I find is interesting is that is very much him and the other shot is very much me. And I think you can see that when you look at the two pictures together.
Very interesting. I can't wait to look at them side by side
Yeah.
now. A last thing I've got, it's an idea I have.
Okay.
I think I was called to music because one of the most prominent memories of my childhood is coming down the stairs and like peeking through the door and seeing my mum crying, listening to Tupac, Dear Mama.
Oh my God, that's so good. Okay, that's what I want to paint.
And I was like, I have this idea. So I took it to my best friend. And I was like, have you got anything similar? He's an artist as well. I won't tell you what. And he was like, he couldn't think of anything. And I went, when your mum got a divorce from your dad, what was the first thing that she did? He was like, she went out and she bought a Salvador Dali print and hung it up in the lounge where we would all sit and eat dinner.
Interesting.
And what do you think he does now?
Painter.
He's a painter.
Yeah.
He draws. That's his work looks almost not like Dali, but
yeah.
It could be up on that wall.
Yeah.
And your dad, the photographer, obviously seeing this alchemy of emotion process.
Yeah.
And being like, and not even consciously, but subconsciously deep somewhere inside, like a seed is planted of that's the way in. That's the vehicle for emotion.
Well, I think something very interesting about what you've said is there was a whole time during my parents' divorce where my dad took back his artwork from the house. And so if you can imagine through a child's eyes, lots of things that used to be hanging on my walls were disappearing, almost out of nowhere, it felt to me. And part of my process of moving into my house where I live by myself, and I've lived there for 2 years, has been nesting. And a part of that process has been, my house is like an art gallery. You come to my house, it's my work, someone else's work. It is all curated across my walls. It goes all the way around through to the bedroom. And I wonder if part of my process is replacing those images that I felt in some way were taken from me. So there's the deep shit.
I think...
Hope you ain't watching this, Dad.
or if you are...
yeah, give me back some of those pictures, man.
Yeah, right.
Do you know, interestingly, like 2 days ago, and I missed the post today, I asked my dad, because I've been trying to delve back into my memories, because there's a lot of my childhood that I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
I've obviously put
Likewise.
it somewhere. And I've got a memory box in my mum's house, and I'd asked both of my parents, can you dig up anything that you've got? I want to see it. I want to whatever. So my dad started sending me a series of photographs. And one of the contact sheets was of my little sister, who's 10 years younger than me. And the first time I ever held her as a baby. And I want it. Like, there's something about that contact sheet, that set of negatives. And I was like, Dad, send that to me. So he's put it in registered post, and it arrived at my house today, but I didn't get it. It's waiting at the post office for me. So that is interesting that I have literally asked him for some of those negatives back, you know?
That is interesting.
I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I knew that I wanted them, and somehow that was rightfully mine. So
that's amazing. It's a little theory I try to hold up with as many people who I feel might be receptive to it as possible. And at the moment, it keeps coming up trumps.
Yeah.
Like it keeps fitting. The pieces keep falling into place. There was something that it's interesting about digging up, trying to rediscover who you were as a child before experience took over, before nurture took over,
before you sought the validation of your audience.
Yeah,
because that's what a child does not do. Not until you're 8.
Is it?
Yeah.
What about when babies, like if the parents?
All about need. It's about survival. It's not about validation.
Okay.
You know, like, I need to be changed. I need food.
Yeah.
You know, I need
to know
touch.
I exist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, that's not about, you know, kids start manipulating, but they don't have the awareness of the audience. I think, I had this conversation with my therapist again, but I think it's until they're 7 or 8.
Okay, cool.
So, you know, maybe that formative period, you know, before you, and that's when you start to realize what shame is and what, you know, being embarrassed about your work is. So yeah, I suppose in some ways for my work, you know, I'm looking back to a time when that audience didn't even exist in my consciousness, you know, like there was no place for me being embarrassed that someone might not like my painting or my sculpture, you know. It's just, I purely did it because that's what I enjoyed doing.
It's a wild question to ask. Who was I before shame?
Yeah.
It's something that I thought about this weekend. I went to my girlfriend's goddaughter's second birthday party.
Yeah.
And there was a boy called Kieran. I think he's 2 years old.
Yeah.
And he is the most purest thing I've ever met in my life. Like, to the point of where it's scary. Like, he is so malleable and so open and so suggestible, but so honest and pure.
Yeah.
And
probably stubborn in his own way.
Yeah. But then I think the world is going to have its way with you, and your parents will turn you into what they think you should be, even if that's a tougher version of yourself.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of what your sincerity might lead you to.
Yeah.
And it's a wild trip for me getting older now, with people having kids and I'm around that, to see them and be like, I know you now.
Yeah.
As a 3-year-old kid or 2-year-old kid, I've seen what you are.
Yeah.
Naturally, truthfully and honestly.
Yeah.
And whatever you turn out to be in the future, I will always know that if you can strip all of that shit back, if you can unlearn all of that stuff, I know what's under there.
Yeah.
Or at least what was under there. Then that gets me thinking about myself, like, who was I naturally, you know? What kind of child was I?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing you're going through this.
No, exactly. I mean, your Kieran is my Kyra, you know. She's like, honestly, the love of my life. I call her my baby, and so do her parents.
Yeah.
You know,
The weird thing is, I barely even know this kid's parents. I've met them like twice or 3 times.
Yeah, but you can't predict what's going to affect you or what's going to kind of like infiltrate your mind, you know. And I didn't have any real interest in children whatsoever until she was born, and she has been such a major and important part of my kind of healing process and my process of understanding who I was. You know, or not just who I was, but what a child is, and how people's reactions to a child and impositions upon a child are part of what forms an adult. And I think having her in my life, you know, and I'm really close to her now, you know, like, by complete accident, I just fell in love with this child, you know, and she's like, I tell people she's my best friend, and sometimes I really mean it, because, you know, she just doesn't impose anything on me. And so I don't feel that I want to do that to her either. You know, I know that she needs boundaries and rules, and, you know, she can't tell what's hot and what's not yet. But I think the most interesting thing I ever learned about children, again, oh, shit, ruining your storage container here.
Whoa, storage, Jesus Christ, give us some credit. Fucking hell.
The studio of dreams. My therapist said to me once that children are born with all of the intelligence they will ever have. They just haven't, and this is true, they just haven't, you know, carved it and formed it and been able to compartmentalize it to understand kind of exactly what is what.
Yeah.
And that was kind of mind-blowing to me, because that's when you realize, you know, people say it all the time, but babies know everything that's going on.
Well, they're closest to God.
Exactly. They're literally reacting to every situation that you put them in. And you think that, you know, they might not understand the words you're saying, but in a much more animal way, they know exactly what your tone of voice means. And that's something that we start to forget or start to react to in an impure way as adults. And, you know, I think her being around in my life and me kind of, you know, wanting to return to, well, what the hell was my childhood like then? You know, where have those memories gone? Because I know that I knew what was going on, and I know that I've formed memories around those times. You know, that is a part of my process of moving forward, I suppose. Yeah.
I think that's a bombshell to end on. I think it's a perfect point of reflection for anybody listening to this, because I know it is for myself as well. It's a question that I am asking more frequently, and my mum's gone through some stuff recently where she's found herself like trying to reconnect with her mum more, which has led her to old photo books and stuff. So I'm vicariously getting the images as well, and I'm like, there was no baby pictures of me until like 6 months ago because life, but then I saw some and I was like, first of all, who is that kid? Second of all, like, what? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's so foreign, and I don't know that child, and I'm trying everything I can to well, not everything. I'm not putting as much effort in as maybe I could, and I'm not asking the questions that maybe I could. Maybe they're too painful to ask at the moment, but I am becoming aware of the necessity to reconnect with whatever energy I possessed in that moment.
But I think, you know, you saying you don't know that child, you do. Yeah. Because he's living...
I've forgotten that child, then, I would say. Or no.
But he hasn't forgotten you.
True. Yeah. You're making me reflect now. How dare you? Right, that's it. That's the end of this episode.
Okay.
But honestly, thank you so much for coming and chatting
Pleasure.
to me. Thank you for being open. And thank you for just giving me the truth.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.
Maybe we can come back to this at some point in the future, and we'll see what I was completely wrong about or completely right about.
Well, once I'm a famous painter and you can be like, that was all because of me.
I'll take all the ownership.
Amazing.
I'm joking, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Kane.
And that's that.
That's that. Lovely. Oh, great.
Well, that was an experience.
Wasn't it? It's wild what you can end up talking about if you just